All right, good morning, everyone. I just want to know if you're in the chat, if you can just press a 1 or a yes or a Y, if you can hear the audio. Hopefully they'll be starting pretty soon. Wonderful. What's up, family? All right, thanks for coming through. Once again, they should be starting pretty soon.
My brother, what's that, Chris? What's that, dog? Brother, good seeing you, my brother.
So are they having, is it the 2-hour one today? Chris, are they having the 2-hour comment today? Do we happen to have the number to call in at all? Huh? Can you still hear me?
What's up, brother? What's going on, man?
Mike, so the audience don't hear you? Well, I did it.
All right, family. So I think there's going to be a 2-hour public comment period. So I wonder what the family's going to be saying today. So you said, Kim, it's in the description?
Yeah,
the
it's in
call-in
the
number?
description link on the YouTube.
Okay, so yeah, if anyone wants to call in, look at the description link down at the bottom.
For attendance, beginning with Madam Chair Moore.
Present.
Madam Chair Moore is present. Vice Chair Brown. Vice Chair Brown is absent. Member Bradford. Member Bradford is absent. Member Grills. Present. Member Grills is present. Member Holder.
Present.
Member Holder is present. Member Jones Sawyer.
Present.
Member Jones Sawyer is present. Member Lewis.
Present.
Member Lewis is present. Member Montgomery Stepp. Member Montgomery Stepp is present. Member Tamaki. Member Tamaki is present. I'll call again. Member Bradford. Member Brown. Madam Chair. There are 9 members on the task force, and the number required for a quorum is 5. The number present is 7. Madam Chair, a quorum has been established.
Thank you, Parliamentarian Johnson. Welcome, members of the public, to the California Reparations Task Force 14th official public hearing. This is our second time in Sacramento. I know Dr. Brown is formally absent, but is he available via video if he wanted to make some audio remarks? I mean, is he available via? Great. So Dr. Brown, we're able to see you. You can begin giving some opening remarks when you're ready. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the members of the task force and members in the general audience. I am very appreciative that you're able to accommodate me to make remarks. And I regret very much that I'm not able to be there because I'm in Ghana, West Africa. As we speak, I was part of the delegation of our Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, that was invited to share with her this historic moment in which she, the first female and person of Asian and African descent, has been blessed with a state dinner. I want to secondly say that I feel very pleased with the very thorough, scholarly, relevant, and substantive work that our task force has done regarding reparations. And they could not, as members of the task force, be a dream team working together, as we well know, without having the very able staff of our Attorney General's office. Finally, I want to say, for the benefit of those in the audience and wherever persons may be, we must set the record straight regarding the contextual situation in San Francisco, in which there were comments that were made attributable to me regarding cash payments. That statement was taken out of context, and definitely does not represent my thinking, my spirit, and my soul as a civil rights activist over 68 years since I was at the age of 14. We must make it very clear that the San Francisco NAACP feels that there should be some form of cash payment and installment to each person who, according to the state standard for eligibility. But we know that there are some facts the public should know about. Number one, the member of the task force, who will remain nameless at this point, who represented to the press that $5 million would be given to African Americans in San Francisco, spoke prematurely. Also, he gave the press the opportunity to have a field day and to really sabotage our efforts with media hype. The headline from the media has been San Francisco reparations plans to pay Black Americans of San Francisco $5 million each. My friends, this is a smear campaign and an intentional fallacy designed to keep us off focus from the practical main thing. And what was that? What is it now? And what it should be in the future is reparations for African Americans. At best, you should know also that the Board of Supervisors that supposedly, according to the press statements, voted unanimously for reparations. It's not true. All they did was gave lip service to reparations and then added in the conjunction, but, what was the first but? Aaron Paskin, the chair of the board, said no cash. Miss Connie Chan, chairperson of the Finance Committee, said I support reparations, but the city is facing a deficit. This indicates that that was a cotton candy, what I call, stance in support of reparations. And I trust and hope that as we move forward as a state reparations task force, we will not ever be victims of this kind of media hype and misrepresentation of the stewardship of both of these task forces. Our position, I sum it up and finally again, is with all the hell, the horror, and the harm that we've gone through, if it were a matter based on a sensible, factual plan for reparations, it would even possibly be more than individual $5 million cash given out. And there were itemized programs, such as the one that we have statewide in areas of education, in health, in housing, etc., which we all agree on. So let us not let anyone take us off of the main thing and divert our attention away from saying to America, to the state, and to the nation, you owe us, but we don't want you to misrepresent us, and we do not want you to, as a nation, just give lip service to reparations, but be engaged and stop making excuses for not giving reparations to African Americans. So thank you. There's more that I'll be saying later on regarding this matter. But again, I say we must, as a family, stay focused and stay on point and make sure we deal with the main thing when we come to the end of our task, all agreeing that we did a great job. Where I came from in Mississippi, there's an old saying, if a task is once begun, never leave it till it's done. Be the labor great or small, do it well or not at all. So let's hang together, do it well, and make sure that we as a state come up with a finished product that even the devil cannot debate against. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for members of the task force for affording me this opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Vice Chair Brown. Excellent as always. Thank you. So now we'll turn to public comment, and we'll start with the phone lines first. So I'll turn to Ms. Martin Walton for assistance. Thank you so much.
Sure. Good morning. Good morning, Chair Moore, task force members, and members of the public. My name is Aisha Martin Walton. I am with the Department of Justice, and the task force would like to hear your comments today. Today, we have 2 hours for public comment. 1 hour will be devoted to members of the public on the phone lines, and 1 hour for members of the public who have joined us in person. If you expressed interest in participating in public comment when you checked in this morning, you received a number card. We will hear from as many of you as possible during this 1-hour period. We will call numbers in groups of 5, so stay comfortably seated until you hear your number range called. Please remember that each speaker will have approximately 2 minutes for your public comment. Once you have completed your comments, please leave your numbers on the podium. Please be advised that in fairness to everyone, at the 2-minute mark, you may be politely interrupted. However, please know that the public comment period exists during each meeting, and the task force encourages everyone to participate. You may also submit written comments at any time via the email at reparationstaskforce@dlj.ca.gov. So with that, let's begin with our online callers. So Kaylee from AT&T, can you give us the first, open the first phone line?
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to make a comment, please press 1 and then 0 on your touch tone phone. You may remove yourself from it at any time by repeating the 1-0 command. If you're on a speakerphone, pick up your handset before pressing the numbers. And today's session will be anonymous. You'll be given a line number. When your line number is called, your line is open. Once again, it's 1 and then 0 at this time. One moment, please. And our first comment will go from line number 9. Please go ahead, line 9.
Yes, this is Prince Ramsey. I want to address 2 things. First, Amos, and then what we need. Reverend Amos, the Bible says those you can't trust with little, you cannot trust with much. You should know how many are eligible descendants of persons emancipated, and that it is doable. And you should either support the $5 million minimum or resign from both task forces in disgrace. Dr. King said, "We are coming for our check," and you turned your back on him as his protege. Would Dr. King say no to a $5 million check for his people? Would Moses ask Pharaoh not to let his people go? So here's what we actually need. The 5 parts that are defined by the UN in reparation: restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and discontinuation. Under restitution, we need our return of our identity as American freedmen and return of property such as Allentown, fix up that Bruce's Beach deal, and even what happened to J.G. Burgess' ancestors. Under compensation, we should get at least $5 million a minimum. We can also do prorated lifetime payments using the average CDC life expectancy of 75 years. Our eligibility requirements should be based on being a person who is the descendant of someone emancipated in the United States. And we should use the 5 categories of genocide and checking at least one of those boxes as well. And then it could be funded not by tax revenue, but by bonds. And the UN says that if local and states do reparations before the national, they will be reimbursed by the national. Under rehabilitation, we should get the Freedmen's Bureau, the Freedmen's Bank, Freedmen's Schools, Freedmen Hospitals, and Freedmen's Courts. Under satisfaction, we should get Freedmen Reconstruction. And under discontinuation or guarantees of non-repetition, we should get genocide prevention using the 5 definitions of genocide.
Thank you,
Lynchings and
sir.
massacres.
Thank you so much for your
Thank you.
comments today. I'm so sorry to have to interrupt you, but we really appreciate it. Keely, next caller, please.
That will come from line 12. Please go ahead.
Good morning.
Line 12, your line is open.
Okay. Good morning, Reparations Task Force members. My name is Christina Griffin-Jones. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with the California Black Power Network. I'm calling to express my support and encourage the task force to review and add our memo's recommendations to your report. I'm wanting to lift up that in the memo, you'll find solutions to some challenges that have come up in what the task force is proposing. For instance, many of the task force's recommendations cannot be separated by lineage because of the way in which places where Black folks live, it can't be separated. For instance, all Black people presently in California and who are also impacted and harmed by health inequities, limited access to psychological care, and the shortcomings of our social services system. We often live right in these same impacted neighborhoods, and that care, that help, that support, reparations, it should not be excluded parts of the community, especially Black folks, because it includes Black immigrants, or because Black immigrants make up the majority of an area or neighborhood. You'll be able to find more of these ways in which our recommendations as the California Black Power Network help to address the challenges that have come up with some of the task force's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments. Keely, next caller.
We'll go next to line 28.
Hello there. This is Tiara Ryder, and I'm a grassroots advocate with the freedmensbureau.org, and I'm calling today to support reparations, which includes direct cash payments at the local, state, and federal levels for the group generally known as African or Black American freedmen, descendants of U.S. chattel slavery, the U.S. emancipation, and or freed Black persons in the U.S. prior to the 19th century. For direct cash repair, we do encourage the task force to create a clear breakdown of what each level of government owes so that it can be used as a framework across the U.S. Both local and state government are upholding white supremacist systemic violence today that is negatively impacting Black American residents, especially in the areas of land use and housing. We've heard rumors about cities like Santa Monica that are being accused of using affordable rental housing that American taxpayers paid for. We heard that they're using that only for white Eastern European immigrants. We are witnessing gentrification and displacement in real time for our Black American population. We do need to intercept the violence as soon as possible. To be clear again, there's no question on whether or not reparations are owed to descendants. They are owed, and we'd like to make a request that the task force send a demand letter to the United Nations to request resolution, bring forward charges against the United States government on behalf of American freedmen for crimes against humanity. We are also asking the task force to support American freedmen in creating a secure trust fund account in order to collectively and voluntarily withhold our state and federal taxes, or at least a portion of, until full repair is made. We also want a portion of the cannabis sales tax to go into that trust account. If our people are continually denied equitable access to the dollar, we will be forced to create a new means of exchange. We are also requesting support from the task force this year to continue with Special Field Order 15 via the Freedmen's Bureau, which began distributing land back to Black Americans after the Civil War. I want to thank the task force for your time. I'm excited to hear your recommendations on direct tangibles for American freedmen, our American heroes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Keely, next line, please.
We'll go to line number 13.
Yes, this is Markavis Bashara Johnson, Dash Gray, owner of Keparah Books, Instagram, Keparah The Movement, Fly America Aboriginal Civil Society grant proposal on the final report on the UN Agenda 21, Item 33 for $600 billion. In closing, I want to address the biasness in the healthcare industry when it comes to the laws of polygamy, in particular biasness in UC Berkeley by Professor Dudley McGovney, who are the non-citizen nationals dealing with the economics of dowry and bride price. There is no biasness in the LGBT except for these transsexual, transnational slave trade baby killers. It was a don't ask, don't tell policy in the Military Defense of Marriage Act repealed by Obama. When we have done this, every Black nation has been successful globally. Also, we need naturopathic provider options in the healthcare system dealing with holistic integrative medicine in the healthcare system for all diseases. You can't stop the sum of the Keparah movement. And since we at the Environmental Protection Agency, we're going to deal with general theory of relativity and Brown emotion. Climate change and global warming is good for Black people. Photosynthesis, global cooling and ice age is not. It was destroyed by the grays. UV rays and ozone, we are already protected. We, the ancient Egyptians, understand fertility rights and family worship and its relationship to agriculture and commerce and keeping the land fertile and peaceful, stay blessed. Know who is capable but necessary to accomplish this mission. And as far as the cannabis industry, look up the Plant Variety Act and the research exemption. It has already been legal and lawful. Janet Yellen, the Secretary of Treasury, notwithstanding. And the Senate Majority Whip is a MP and Lord of Parliament for England. So slavery and colonization is still happening, and they still in our resources. I'm agree with the fourth order. California shine light on that. The prostitute of Babylon going against Pippin the Egyptian, the Don have fun with it. This is empirical evidence, not anecdotal. Amicus Curiae, just sanguinis, not just solely. We are not Leviticus 13 lepers. T-grade, copy that, copycat, 9 married, 2 services, not elemental 5 government arts of cosmos, irrecoverable embassy records, exonerate, mature count, breathe in, oxygen, breathe out, carbon dioxide. Peace.
Sir, thank you so much for your comments this morning, and they are duly noted. Thank you. Keely, our next caller, please.
Line number 8. Line number 8, your line is open.
Yes.
Please unmute.
All right. Well, good morning, Task Force. This is Truth Bay, 1619 Reparations Project, going IG 1619 Reparations. So Dr. Amos Brown did not show up today because he didn't want that smoke. Overall, we're going to just break it down here. NAACP received $50 million from Wells Fargo last month for their retirement plan. So you have Reverend Arnold G. Townsend, Jonathan Z. Butler, Yolanda D.A. Williams, Cassie Cook, Reverend James Parrish Smith, Catherine Bradford, and Ruth Mays, all from the NAACP. Now, I agree with you, Brown, that you should not give reparations without a plan. The $5 million to San Francisco, as you stated on Roland Martin, yes, there was no concrete plan for you guys to agree on it. But the NAACP since 1909 was created to have a plan for the advancement of colored people. But you use Black issues to rise above. And as Wells Fargo stated, this is the biggest donation to a civil rights organization for Black Americans. That's what Wells Fargo put out. Do they know that you're not fighting for Blacks, that you're fighting for colored folks? So please stop blowing smoke, sir. I respect my elders, but I don't respect you getting your funding for your retirement plan and then denying reparations for everybody else. And then you want to backtrack. So yes, there is a conflict of interest, and our chairman, Henry Bishop Williams, said it best. No offense, but some people need to be in jail. So as we continue for us to actually get the reparations, NAACP, we're requesting you nationwide to focus on a plan. Write your plan. Even the church pastors, all of you reverends out there, you should be writing the plan for the Black community you serve. So when it comes time for reparations, you say, here's our plan for Black Americans. Here's our plan. Instead of denying, delaying, and not writing nothing, it's unacceptable.
Thank you so much for your comments. We need to go to the next line. Keely, next speaker, please.
We'll go to line number 15.
Yes, greetings and good morning, Task Force. I urge this esteemed task force to hold additional meetings in Antelope Valley as requested by Madam Chair, especially considering the percentages of Blacks in Palmdale are now at 12.35%. Lancaster is 16.86% in comparison to other cities like San Diego and San Francisco. Also, we need to have a few more meetings in Antelope Valley because there's egregious racial harms that are taking place, especially in schools, where our Black students are being called the N-word. We're having so many racial harassment cases that are coming up, not only in Antelope Valley, but throughout the entire state. So we really, really need to look at the amounts of harm that's taking place in our schools. I encourage the task force and the California DOJ to look into the unprecedented cases or the unreported cases of racial harassment and assault. And we also need to focus on Dr. Margaret Fortune's plan for public schools. And I'm using also a lot because there's a lot, but we also need to avert a significant amount of funds for education reparations to go towards community schools and African-centered and private schools, because at the end of the day, Black educators know how to educate, love, and care for our youth. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Keely, next line.
We'll go next to line number 36.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello, can you hear me?
yes, we can.
We can.
Okay, thank you. Hello, thank you for this opportunity. I've been trying to participate during this task force public comment session since January without success. And I'm here to represent a perspective that I haven't heard when watching the hearings online. My name is Fatima Gilliam. I'm a third-generation Californian. I'm the descendant of slaves whose family has been in the United States since 1630. My grandfather, Alfred Hassan, was a California state track champion in 1930, and my great-aunt, Zaino Hassan Spencer, was the first Black female judge in the state of California, the first on California's Court of Appeal. Both my parents grew up in Los Angeles. All 5 of my siblings were born and raised in California. I was born and raised in Berkeley. I'm a lawyer and a diversity consultant. And in law school years ago, I authored a 70-page paper making the legal argument for reparations. And I've also written a book entitled Race Rules, What Your Black Friend Won't Tell You. That's coming out in January 2024 that discusses reparations. I've shared this background to demonstrate the credibility behind my forthcoming statements, my long-term dedication to reparations as an issue, and my deep ties and roots in California. California has shaped who I am, including the racist, traumatic experiences I endured as a child and young adult growing up in California. The first time I was called the N-word was in Berkeley. I witnessed the LAPD harass and incarcerate relatives. And it's unfortunate that harms linked to education aren't included in the scope of your mandate, since there is great impact on life's opportunities or lack thereof, and the state is littered with the racist, emotional, and financial stain of countless Blacks like myself that were subjected to its schools as collateral damage. My family's condition has been directly impacted by the systemic racist experiences across many generations, impacting our physical and emotional health, our inability to create intergenerational wealth, and our inability to afford home ownership in our beloved home state. I went through school in California, including enduring many openly racist teachers who made me the target of their white supremacy. But I no longer live in California, but return frequently since it's still my home. I'm here to represent the voice of Californians who have strong ties to the state, but were pushed out, driven out, or priced out.
I'm so sorry
It's
to
part of the
interrupt you
purpose
in
of
the middle of your sentence, but we're out of time. However, just know that there's public comment tomorrow. Feel free to try to call back in tomorrow, and your written comments are always welcome at reparationstaskforce@doj.ca.gov. Thank you again. Keely, next line, please.
Line 54.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Good
can.
morning. Excellent. My name is Audra Walton, lifelong resident of California. Currently, the state of California's minimum wage is $15.50 an hour. If we use this figure to adjust for inflation specific to the state, I believe we can bring greater perspective to reparations owed to the American descendants of slavery. Let's do some math. Most foundational Black Americans that were born into slavery began working at plus or minus age 10. They worked on average of 10 hours a day for plus or minus 362 days a year. For this math exercise, let's say the FBA survived 35 years of torture and trauma under the American slavery system and retired at the age of 45. To adjust for the cost of keeping a slave, we will take today's federal, state, Social Security, and Medicare out of the annual pay, and leaving us with $44,609.58 take-home pay. At 35 years, that's $1,561,335.30. Because the American freedmen's pay was invested into our country and the state instead of being paid to them, we should be assuming interest. If we use today's federal Parent Plus loan for college students at 7.54% for 99 years, reparations would be $13,216,076.18. If we apply 2.2% compounding interest, reparations would be $13,462,781.57. 99 years is my only arbitrary number. Slavery ended 157 years ago, and doing that math leaves us with applying 7.5% simple interest to that balance due amount of $1,561,335.30 for over 157 years. For 157 years, for a total of $20,044,106.37, or 2.2% compounding interest, giving us $47,564,919.65. There are a couple of formulas for you. Thank you so very much for doing this work. I appreciate you and your time.
Thank you.
And your consideration.
Thank you so very much for your comments this morning. Keely, next line.
Line number 58.
Hi, my name is Charles Jameson. Black people in the U.S. have a spending power of around 1.6 trillion. Because we don't have our own core economy, we don't retain much of that. Generational wealth is built on long-term strategic planning. Strategic planning is done through sound economic practice. If we as foundational Black Americans are given reparations without having a sound economic infrastructure, the money will not be retained and turned into generational wealth. The proof is in the $1.6 trillion spending we do every year. I have formed an economic plan that will put us as reparation eligible Black Americans on track to generational wealth. The core of every economy is the bank. As an entrepreneur, I think in terms of competition and the strategy of the team. The team obviously needs a central bank that would need a charter. Not only will we need a bank charter, but we would need a city to operate in. O.W. Gurley started Black Wall Street with 40 acres. I have 56 acres of commercial property in Imperial County, California, that is surrounded by unincorporated land that I am looking to form into a city or special district named La Viva Ritchie. La Viva Ritchie will be built on green energy and set the standard for the world. La Viva Ritchie will house the majority of the Salton Sea, which has the potential to supply 44% of lithium needed to produce batteries for electric vehicles. With the help of Governor Newsom and other California legislators and officials, we can make this a reality. La Viva Ritchie will rival international cities like Las Vegas and Dubai. I am also working on projects that will bring billions of dollars of revenue to California and the proposed La Viva Ritchie area, starting with a outdoor special event center similar to Coachella that will host the annual Juneteenth celebration and possibly the Hip Hop Hall of Fame, along with 8 other large-scale events like the 4th of July and Memorial Day weekend celebration.
I hate to interrupt you in the middle of your sentence, but thank you so very much for your comments this morning and taking the time to share with the task force. Keely, next line.
Line number 31.
Right, come on, person.
Line number 31, your line is open.
Oh, sorry. Good morning. This is Friday Jones. My name is Constance Jones Muhammad. I'm the president of the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants, founding member of a coalition for a just and equitable California, and the vice chair of Los Angeles' Reparations Task Force appointed by Mayor Garcetti. Today, my comments are my own. I am going to ask 3 things. One, I would like for this task force, while you're in your final phases, to consider allocation and recommendations for Allensworth, a historic Black African-American town established here in the state of California that has a national park that's fallen apart, that has water problems that the state is not dealing with, and this body has the ability to make right historic wrongs. 2, I am going to ask that the language that is universal or Black or race-based in all of the recommendations that have been put forth by this task force be made specific to the beneficiary class, full stop. All the policies should be for African Americans descended from persons enslaved in the United States, also known as American freedmen.
The last thing is I need this task force to really get ahead of a lot of the misinformation that is out there. Daily Mail, I don't even know who their reporters are. I don't know if they actually come to these hearings and pay attention, but the things that are being put forth by some of the press, that are being put forth by organizations that do not have a vested interest or the best interest of American freedmen at heart need to be set right. That is my time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Keely, next line.
Line number 39.
Yes, good morning, LaDonna Williams. First, I want to say to Dr. Brown, shame on you. Absolutely shame on you. God Almighty, for those of us that do follow him, we all know he detests a forked tongue, which is what you have spoken throughout this process. And you've attempted to blame everyone else for what you put forward, which was sabotaging this process against descendants of slavery, Black Americans in this country. We are due these reparations. You have attempted to sabotage those for your own interest, your own government-funded programs that have taken advantage of poor and elderly. That's why you're going so hard for these programs that keep our people enslaved. We are going to be released through this, and we hope that this task force sees through these antics that you have continually put forward. You give us these fiery speeches only to turn around as Judas did Jesus and betray us. What we're asking for those of us that are deserving and are entitled to these benefits, because you say you want to hear from the people, well, we're the people. We want you as a task force in California to match these beginning payments of reparations, match that $5 million with ongoing payments and upkeep. As the economy changes, so should our payments increase like you do for the Indians. We want the foundational Black Americans, descendants of slavery, to be made a protected class. We want our reparations to be tax exempt. We also are entitled to land acquisition, as today is being given to Indians, not even back to them because it belongs to us, but you sidestepped us. And last but not least, him being in Ghana with VP Kamala Harris, whose administration has done nothing for Black folks, is a symbolic
Thank
gesture.
you. Thank you
showing
very
us
much for your
how
comments. I'm sorry to have to cut you off. Keely, next line, please.
Line number 30.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the task force. My name is Michael Crockett, and I regret not being able to be there. I am caring for a newborn African-American infant, healthy. So thank you for the congratulations from the panel. I have 3 quick points. And I do regret not being able to follow this panel as closely, the task force as closely. At the last meeting, I heard definition of descendant, and I wasn't quite sure I heard correctly. Thought I heard that there was a cutoff on who would be entitled to any reparations or programs or whatever restitutions would be available. And my understanding was that it was a cutoff of 1865, meaning that a person had to be a slave in 1865. I hope I misheard, because let me offer this. What about colored troops who fought for freedom in the Civil War? Many of them joined in 1862. I hope I'm not just arguing a moot point, but by definition, when they joined the service, they were no longer slaves. Some critics argue that your definitions are forcing African Americans to prove how Black they were, how much of a slave they were. Are we, if my understanding of this definition, are we punishing by exclusion descendants of these colored troop veterans because they dared fight for freedom? If so, and I'm not arguing a moot point, that I consider that a mockery of the intent of the entire task force. There are other examples: slave owners who would free half of his slaves and provide for their shipping through the ACS back to Africa, and then the other half they had to work. Required them to work 15 years, and after which they would be given their freedom. So this was
Sir,
in
I'm so
1850.
sorry to interrupt you in the middle of your thought, but thank you so much for taking the time to get on the line today. Keely, our next caller.
Line 77.
Good morning, task force members. My name is Ernest Russell, and I'm calling in just to leave a few comments. The first few will be, I would like for the task force to make sure all reparations plans are specific to the descendant community and that no universal or race-based plans are allowed. In addition, I asked the task force to do more to fight reparations, misinformation, and disinformation. And I also want to thank you guys for voting for the Freedmen Affairs Agency and choosing lineage-based reparations as eligibility. In addition to those comments, I would like to also chime in on agenda item number 7 and state that I agree with the compensation approach where cumulative reparations compensation would be paid to the eligible class, as well as specific reparations compensation and restitution for individual provable harms. I think those are the best approach to ensuring that, reparation is not only uniform, but in specific cases where provable individuals are also able to be reimbursed or compensated for the harm that their families endured as specific, individuals. My other comments is also to support or actually encourage the task force to consider historical or legacy Californians in the residency requirement if one is established. I think based upon the task force's current recommendations in the draft, that you guys would define residency based on a domicile requirement. And I think that AB 3121 states that the harm inflicted on individuals in California as a result of the actions by California would include, or at least, I think it would include the legacy California population that has been excluded from this, consideration. And then my last comments are going to be toward the agenda item number 11, which seeks to recommend
I'm
to the
so
legislature.
sorry to have to interrupt you, sir, but feel free to try to call in again tomorrow or submit your remaining comments through the email address. Again, thank you so much for taking the time this morning. Keely, next caller, please.
Line 23.
Hello, yes? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, it's sad that we are moving away from King's dream of being judged by the content of your character instead of the color of your skin and moving towards a society where only race matters. We have become obsessed with defining everything in terms of race, using it as a crutch and excuse for not taking advantage of opportunities. We have developed an entitlement mentality, and never has it been put on display more than with this disgraceful reparations board. Bottom line, 1, slavery ended 160 years ago. It's wrong to ask taxpayers, many from families like mine who came to the U.S. after slavery ended, to pay for the wrongs of slavery. There is no causal link. The people involved have long since died, both perpetrators and victims. African American problems today are not the legacy of slavery or even racism. Many blacks are succeeding. Poor African Americans are victims of their own choices, the breakdown of their families, and choosing dependence on social programs. This reparations scheme further disincentivizes them from taking advantage of what is available to them and will not fix the root cause of their problems. And 3, the U.S. has spent trillions on affirmative action programs, minority quotas and goals, college entry advantage, subsidized housing, healthcare, employment development. And least we forget general social welfare programs where there is no doubt a substantial fraction goes to individual African Americans. Do these programs count as reparations? But the better question is, why haven't decades of these special advantages and privileges worked for African Americans? Why do 50% of Black children live with a mother only? Children in fatherless homes are more likely to drop out of school, commit crimes, use drugs, be a burden on society. Fix that, which leads to poverty. And poverty is linked to the lack of education. Why are African Americans not taking advantage of educational opportunities, especially in California? Fix that. And homicides. 90% of Black homicides are committed by fellow Blacks. Fix that. I am sure wrong has been done decades and centuries ago. It has been done to all races. to my ancestors, to myself. Where do reparations start and stop? You are creating a racial divide and exploiting white
Thank you
guilt.
so much for your
Shame
comments.
on you.
Your time is up. Next caller.
We'll go next to line number 14.
Good morning. My name is Mecca Morgan, and I'm a real estate broker licensed in the state of California. I would like to bring to the attention of everyone Assembly Bill 1466, signed by Governor Newsom. This bill requires the removal of racist and restrictive language from all property deeds in the state of California, some dating back as far as 170 years ago. This is very alarming because these historical records are irrefutable evidence of racial discrimination in housing throughout California and can be used by the task force to assist in legitimizing the reparative justice that we are seeking. Such removal of these historical facts are detrimental because this bill legally deletes the truth. Please take some time to learn more about Assembly Bill 1466. Thank you.
Thank you. Keely, next caller.
Line number 19.
Hello. Are you able to hear me right now?
We are.
All right. To Honorable Sheila Jackson Lee, I thank you for your celestial efforts. We should all recognize that many before us have dedicated their entire lives to the forthcoming study. I need you to know I appreciate your work. To all of you, Madam Chair, Task Force, and contributors, thank you. Success is in the measure we enable. My name is Prentice Johnson. I'm an author, graphic design artist, and aspiring entrepreneur. In Minneapolis, we wait anxiously to receive the torch that the elders have illuminated. I've written an autobiography and offer it as a way to replenish the United States economy. No matter the book's actual value, it's just a small piece to the great puzzle. No, many people will continue to suffer and hope that those who understand are able to reach a proper conclusion. What we are reaching is a form of long-term greatness. Our contributors will take a holy stance in history. All will not directly benefit, but enable human progress, not just Black. Grant ourselves the right to reach our grand potential, not just happiness. We need to make a conscious effort to change our way of thinking. Mostly, we need to label ourselves. I identify as American Indigenous of Advanced Melanin. There's something stable and a bliss far beyond the pursuit of happiness. This is the time. Blessings and success.
Thank you for your comments. Keely, next line.
We'll go next to line 65. Line 65, your line is open.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I will be very brief in regards to all of this. I strongly believe that California was never a slave state. The issues that you are addressing should be put upon the federal government. This is an issue that the federal government should be handling. The state of California should not be responsible for these issues. Plenty of other states have done this to the people. I strongly believe this. I don't believe this is an issue that should be addressed by the state and have the burden of the state pay for this. I am not denying in any way in regards to the racist issues that have happened in this state and the problems that this state does have. But as far as the restitution goes, I strongly believe that it is a federal issue and should be addressed by that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller.
Line 64.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Your line is open.
Okay, so as we approach the day of the proposal release, I asked the task force if the body is extended for another year, what becomes of the role of the task force? Will it behave in an advocacy role to push legislation that comes out for the out of the proposal report? Obviously, most of the groundwork will have to be done by the grassroots organizers, but if those organizers have a central designation to funnel the organizing efforts that already have attachments to sitting legislators, that could be an invaluable resource. I also think it is the role of the task force to make sure that reparations as a concept is kept clear in the public. That means calling out current projects that are being called reparations but fall short, such as the case with the Evanston housing program. Evanston has been pushed into the mainstream along with Robin Rue Simmons, who recently had to go back and vote for a direct payment option in lieu of a glorified housing program after potential recipients were written out or at threat of being ineligible. Finally, reparations should be lineage-based, specific to the descendants of U.S. chattel slavery, not a class-based program, an all-blacks program. If Black immigrants feel like they have a claim, then that claim needs to be adjudicated separately and apart from a lineage-based reparations claim. There was a woman, an African woman interviewed on the BBC out of London. She claimed she had family in San Francisco who were part of the Akan tribe, and that the Akan tribe were heavy profiteers in the slave trade. She herself called out the irony if her slave trading family members also got to receive benefits from the repair. Please make sure that that when we're generating the proposals, that the proposals meet the eligibility criteria. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller.
Line 47. Line 47, your line is open. Please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Leslie May. I am California. I lived in Berkeley in the 50s and moved to Oakland, California in the 60s. I now live in Antioch, California, which is in Contra Costa County. First thing I would like to say is that I would love for this committee, I appreciate you all. I'd love for the committee to come out here and have a one-day seminar conference or something, because this is one of the most racist counties there is in California. I am a Black female, physically disabled person. I was born that way. So I have faced racism. I faced every kind of horrific physical attack during the 50s and 60s, living in Berkeley and in Oakland. Now, as a 71-year young woman, I have been in a mental health therapist during this time. I noticed that when talking about reparations, no one has mentioned including mental health services for African Americans that are descendants of slaves. We have generational slavery going down. I heard a woman speaking about crime and single parent families and all of that. Well, guess what? That started back in slavery, and that started when people were freed from slaves, being freed. The women and their husbands and sometimes their children were separated miles, states apart, and they have to find each other. So this is directly attributable to slavery. But I just want you to make sure that you put in your action plan more mental health services for African Americans, which we lack all over the United States.
Thank you so much for your comments this morning.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Keely, let's go to the next caller.
Line 21, your line is open. Line 21.
I'm calling with the California Black Power Network. I would like to comment today to address the creation of a government-regulated oversight agency over the Freedmen's Bureau. If we give the authority and full responsibility for implementation into the hands of a government agency, it leaves these programs and policies vulnerable to changes in elected leadership, budget priorities, and other government transitions. It is not a wise decision to give the importance given the importance and significance of reparations. An agency is beholden to state leadership, funding, and other potentially detrimental factors. It is important to consider how we are safeguarding against those changes to ensure not only that Black folks remain in control, but also have agency over reparations implementation that isn't dismantled by conservative leadership, for example. I advise the Reparations Task Force to consider these very important questions. How are we maintaining control as a Black community over reparations, and how can we protect this process? Reparations are a necessary step for Black people to begin to heal and an opportunity for California to begin to right the wrongs that it has inflicted on Black Californians. Reparations policy in California will not only benefit Black Californians, but will encourage, impact, and guide future reparations policies for the rest of America and throughout many other countries. We cannot afford to get it wrong. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. Keely, next caller.
Thank you. And for any late callers that have joined, you can press 1 then 0 to get in queue for your phone comments. We'll go next to line number 72.
Hello? Hello?
Your line is open.
All right, good morning. My name is Velma Leviston, and I just want to say I appreciate everything that the task force is doing, and I'm trying my best to keep up with everything that's going on. I wanted to be present in the meeting this morning, but however, I was not able to attend due to something sort of came up, last minute. And also, I wanted to let the task force know. And I do not appreciate the way Reverend Brown is coming at this particular situation, denying money to the people of color, and I don't want no organization over no money for me, okay? Because I came from El Dorado, Arkansas, with 2 kids and some clothes, okay? From welfare to millionaire. And I am a commercial investor. And what I would like to see is that every African American have a home to go to and whatever they need. Because I know I was brought up very poorly. I know what an outside toilet is. I know what a number 3 tub is, okay? But I thank God for where I am today. And I want them to know I am willing. You can nominate me willing to help any African American get off the streets of Oakland and anywhere else. I would be more than willing to help them become homeowners and home ownership and places for them to live, because I think it's ridiculous. There's much money here floating around in California, and we got all these homeless people out here on the ground. And I know you guys are going through a lot. I'm listening in to all these conversations and stuff like that. But yes, we do deserve payment, not to no organization, not to no NAACP, because I've reached out to them before. They don't have to do anything, nothing, okay? I have a son that was incarcerated for 17 years for nothing. I helped him through that. He come out now, got a job and doing good, okay? And I have another son and a daughter who's doing good. And I was
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for your comments this morning and taking the time to call in. The task force really appreciates it. Keely, we have time for a few more callers. Next line.
Line 60, your line is open.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Yes. I was born here in California, but my second and third grandfather, they were also enslaved in Virginia, Pennsylvania. They also owned property. They did serve in the war. My third great grandfather got married to the female, his wife, and they both had to have permission from slave owners to get married. They also had land. My great grandmother had 22 children, which is one is my grandfather. They did come from a path of slavery, but I'm not saying that's an excuse for Blacks to, be suffering. The thing is, property was handed down to us, but was taken back. We were ran off the land. My ancestors were ran off the land. So they left property behind that became owned by the white people. They never had a chance to leave any kind of inheritance to the generations that we are now. So therefore, we have taken a great loss as far as property ownership in Pleasanton, California. They're majority white. That is unaffordable for a person that's making even $30, $40 an hour in California. They make everything go up so that you can't afford to live in their neighborhood. If it's affordable, they will make it unaffordable. You can buy a house, you can go to buy a house, a white person probably would need nothing down or $2,000 down, but when a black person go to buy a house, we need all this kind of income and all this information. We need $20,000 down on the same house and can have excellent credit just like a white person. So here in California, prices are ridiculous, but if we had inherited what was left to us, we would have had a head start to be where they are, to own, to be property owners. As far as reparations being paid, they didn't tell the Mexicans what to do with their money when they got paid from Wells Fargo.
Ma'am, thank you. Thank you so much for your comments this morning. Thank you. Keely, next line.
Line 37, your line is open.
Hello? Hello?
Your line
Hi.
is open.
Hi. My name is Cheryl Randolph, and I want to talk to the committee. You need to be clarified about this San Francisco thing because I'm just a typical black person. And every time you talk about reparations, you say San Francisco. But I was raised and lived in San Francisco all my life. But then they pushed us out. We're all over the Bay Area. Are we still qualified for this reparation because after they pushed us out? Because there's not very many black people living in San Francisco now. Okay, because like I said, I lived in Hunters Point where all the chemicals was out there. I grew up in San Francisco. I had all my children in San Francisco. I went to school in San Francisco. So are we qualified for this reparation? Because you keep on saying San Francisco. And that's what needs to be clarified for the people that's living in, that's been moved out to Antioch, Pittsburgh. They need to know they are still qualified for this reparation. Are you just talking about people that's living in San Francisco now? But what about the people that came from the South with their children? They grew up there. They lived there all their life. And Hunters Point, you know they got all kind of chemicals there, causing people to get cancer. So that's my question. Explain yourself when you say San Francisco. Because like I said, a lot of San Francisco people was pushed out of San Francisco. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Keely, let's go to the next line.
Line 57, your line is open.
Okay. Hi, my name is Deidre Boshiff, and I am an African American, and I'm proud. Secondly, as a race, we didn't climb walls to get here to American land of the free. We're supposed to be free, and until we're free, nobody's free. The Constitution is alive, and really, who are we the people? We were brought here under heinous conditions, work without pay, wives, children, sisters, grandmothers, mothers, and our men were beaten, sold, killed, raped, and taken and split apart away from one another as a family and pitted against one another, which unfortunately has left Americans bitter down into the generations with little or inadequate no psychological help, medical treatment to deal with these unfortunate circumstances. Caucasians won't even admit the unjustification and the wrongs that they have done to our race. Black kids, that's when black kids should be taught in schools, and yet this means that this would happen again if we let it. Racism is real. Here are some facts. As it stands today, geographical disparities. In Oakland, Vail, Richmond, there are only one shelter for blacks, for people, period. You go further north, I'm in Marin. If you come up here and go further north, there are many people, there are many shelters and many people, and they're 24-hour shelters. Black people have to be out by 6 o'clock in the morning, no food, no nothing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your call today and for your comments. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Keely, next line.
Line 32, your line is open.
Hello?
She took herself out of queue. We'll go.
No.
There, your line is open.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I wanted to call and kind of speak on some of the things that are some of the comments that I keep hearing. So the first thing is money has to be number one in regards to a cash payment, because that is the only universal equalizer. It is universal and transcends generations. So I am 45, my mother is 70, my grandmother is in her 90s. We are not going back to school. So just offering, saying education could be a reparation is not going to work for us. Second, this notion that there was not slavery in California, that is incorrect. Slavery is said to have come to California during the gold rush, but even that's not totally true. It was actually here before. And if we actually start admitting that some of the indigenous people here were of African descent and were here prior to the slave ships, then we know that some of the indigenous people that were enslaved here in California under Spain were melanated people. Another thing, this thing that this is divisive and that, you know, Black people are just not taking advantage of opportunity, that is an oxymoron, because if you look at Europeans, unfortunately, they are trying to get away from the fact that there were things that gave them legs up. You had things like the in Massachusetts Bay, where plantation rights in six square mile tracts were given to worthy individuals. You had in Maryland, Virginia, established 50-acre land grants. You had a federal ordinance in 1785 that authorized the sale of 640-acre tracts to settlers for $1. You had the federal government establishing liberal and credit privileges in the Western territories for $1 an acre. Slaves not eligible, Blacks were not eligible for this. You had the Federal Preemption Act grants land sellers' rights, purchase up to 160 acres each for $1.25 per acre.
Thank you. Thank you so
Homestead
much.
Act,
I'm
settlers
sorry to
160
interrupt
acre
you in
tracts.
the middle of your sentence, but thanks so much for your valuable comments. Keely, we have time for 2 more callers before we switch to in-person. Go ahead.
Line 99 is open.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I want to play something for my submission. My name is Ms. Zinga Griffin.
I want to address some prefacing with this presentation of the public education plan. And it goes to the issue of the vote on lineage in March of 2022. And I think there's been some legitimate concerns spoken about that. And I just wanted to clarify if there, to remove any doubt for both myself, for Cheryl Grills, and I think for every task force member on the lineage question, the eligibility issue. The task force has spoken. The task force has spoken. And as far as I can see, every task force member, including myself, intends to carry out the will of the task force. Period. And so I will say, and maybe this matters less, but from a personal point of view, the reality of a specific harm class of descendants, foundational Black Americans, needs to be acknowledged, that heretofore has been invisible, that has fallen at the bottom of every metric in California that matters, absolutely has to be recognized. And whether that's in compensation or policy, we believe that. and Member Grills believes that too. The reason I say it's sort of secondary, because it doesn't matter. The task force has spoken. And every task force member, I think, is duty bound to carry out the will of the task force. That's the purpose of deliberation. That's the purpose of voting. And once the body decides the direction, that is the direction.
Thank you so much for your comments this morning. I'm sorry to interrupt you in the middle of your statement. Next caller, this will be our last speaker for our online commenters. Keely?
And that will come from line 115.
Good morning. Thank you, Task Force. My name is Cynthia, and I'd like to get straight to the point. The harms, the cause and effect. We're the only people, you guys, where our identity were stolen, and we're the only group of people that have our slave owners' names. So that's where it should start, because of the identity. And I also want to talk about the policy. Our liberation was under the 13th Amendment. That was our liberation. But instead, that clause that's there, it re-enslaved us. It allowed, the slavery was abolished except the punishment of a crime. So we were always hunted, always, hunted down for just being anything we did. Get married, do this, you punish, you do this, you do that. That's a crime, that's a crime. So that legislation right there, when you wrote legislation, when the United States did that, that re-enslaved our people. So that's unconstitutional right there. So I'm asking for that to be removed and replaced because it's unconstitutional. I'm asking for a trust fund. I do want direct cash payments, land grants. That was 200 and some years to 400 years of free slave labor. Nobody in the United States has been treated like this. So those are crimes against humanity. And I'd like to see, I just want to thank you guys. You guys are doing an awesome job, and we must get the legislation removed, replaced, and compensate. And that's what I have for our people, and definitely put in a protected class of people. I mean, we're constantly antagonized. We go to work. You can't get a decent job because of the color of your skin, because the antagonizing continues. It's daily. It's from the coworker. It's from here. It's from you go into any area, try to buy a home. There's laws put in place. So we definitely must be put in a protected class of people. And I do think that when that does happen, birth certificates, eligibility must be mandatory. Be born Black on that birth certificate for foundational Black Americans.
Thank you.
And, because the legislation.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry to you have to end your statement, but thank you so much for calling in this morning. Keely, thank you for your assistance this morning. We really appreciate it. And we are now going to be moving into the in-person comments. So again, those of you who are in attendance today, when you checked in this morning, you should have received a number card. I will call the first 5 speakers. Number 1, Reginald Romaine, Kim Mims, Chris Lodgen, D, and I believe I'm pronouncing this right, Vapor? Or first 5. If you have a number 1 through 5, please come forward. And you will have 2 minutes. I'll let you know when to begin. So Reginald Roman, Kim Mims, Chris Lodgen, D, and Vapor. So if you have number 1, please come to the mic. Go ahead, please. Good morning.
Good morning. Can we keep this off record just real quick? It's showing a lot of friction with these phone calls before us. We spend time and money. You've seen my face since 11th meeting. We spend our time and money to come here, and for them to get priority over us as they sit in these glass houses and throwing rocks. I just want you guys to understand something.
I'm sorry, your time's started, so but feel free.
Record because I'm just everybody.
But we need you to go ahead and begin your comments. Thank you.
Through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farm. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we are faced with. And this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
But not only that, we coming to get our land. But not only that, we coming to get our freedom. You guys listen up, Black Americans. Listen up. We got to come together as one. We got to work on this 90% black on black crime. And I'm not challenging every black organization. Come and get with us. We just started the 1619 Reparations Party. Go to onepercentage.org. We need your time. We just got 3 properties yesterday at Riverside City as I went on Skid Row, and we went yesterday successfully and got 3 properties for our peoples. Now we need everybody to come together. Go on that site, sign up, give us whatever you can, your time, your resources, your money, whatever. But I'm gonna say this right here. We need our mental health care. We got to deal with these people because they can't keep going back on these streets. In Temecula, we had a CRT argument. White folk gonna tell us that we can't even study our own heritage.
Sir, I'm so sorry to cut you off. I know you just got started, but I'm so sorry. But please come back tomorrow or submit your comments in writing through Reparations Task Force at dlj.com. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next speaker, please. You may begin.
Hello. Everything that Reggie said, I agree with him wholeheartedly there. But good morning to the task force. My name is Kim Mims. I'm co-founder of Amend the Mass Media Group and a co-founding member of Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, CJEC. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this morning. Opportunity of any kind is not often extended to descendant communities, which is why we are here staking our claim for reparations today. First, I want to thank the task force for voting to establish lineage-based eligibility criteria for the reparations. The proposals and recommendations set forth by the task force must also meet the lineage-based criteria standard. Chair Camilla Moore mentioned that Governor Gavin Newsom has established a race and equity commission of some sort. All universal programs and policies should be placed under the racial equity umbrella and not in the reparations bucket. I also want to thank you for voting to establish a full-service Freedmen's Agency, which will help descendant communities repair past harms and combat continued systemic racist systems. There's a lot of misinformation being put out right now in regard to the California reparations, and the task force, DOJ, and Charles Communication Group needs to do more to challenge and correct the false narratives being spun in the main media. As someone born into a civil rights era, Generation X, like Malcolm X, I never imagined that I would be standing here today in 2023, fighting for reparations, but here we are. So let's get into it. I know the Reparations Task Force is in the proposal stage of the process, and I just want you to pay very close attention to 3 things: employment, housing, and heirs property. Many of us were lured out to California, our family were lured out to California.
I'm so sorry to have to cut you off in the middle of your sentence, but thank you so much. And feel free to come back tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Next caller. Good morning. And your time is.
All right, let's get to it. Chris Lawson, lead organizer and acting president, Coalition for a Just and Equitable California. It's good to see y'all. So first, thank you so much for voting for the full service, as my partner said, Freedmen's Agency. That was a dope vote. Thank you. Secondly, as always, thank you for supporting and voting for lineage, specificity, eligibility for California reparations. Thank you. Also, as my partner Kim said, Do more to fight the misinformation. Do more to fight the disinformation. The fight for California reparations is on now. It's not waiting until the legislation comes out next year. The fight is on now. The fight for public opinion is on now. So do more to fight the misinformation. Do more to fight the disinformation that's coming out. Lastly, I don't want to see, a lot of us don't want to see no universal nothing in that final report. No race-based nothing in that final report. Everything gotta be for us, everything. Universal plans don't work. What happens is you do something universal and then the people with the most take the most. The people with the second most take the second most. The people with the third most take the third most, and we get nothing or less than nothing. No universal nothing. Everything specific to the descendant community. Everything specific to the people you said this is specifically for. Universal plans do not work. Race-based plans are almost certainly illegal. Race-based all Black people policies are almost always certainly unconstitutional. No universal plans, no race-based plans, specifically every single thing specific to the descendant community. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next speaker, please go ahead.
Good morning. Everything Chris said, times 3. My name is Don Bastiano, and there's been several discussions surrounding eminent domain and the taking of land, property, and businesses from Black families. Many of these proceedings were initiated by the California Department of State Parks, Caltrans, the Attorney General, and other local and state entities under the false pretense of bettering the lives of Californians. We know some of the state and local entities that took property and land from Black families, far too many Black families to speak to individually here today. But what of the other organizations that assisted in taking wealth from Black families? Not only here, but throughout the United States, many organizations had a permeating influence in many Black communities, gaining trust, taking property, deeds, and securing others' wealth for their own. The local Sacramento chapter of the NAACP drafted a will and became the conservators of that will just a few weeks prior to the death of my great-grandfather, Pearlie Monroe, in 1963. While he lay dying in a nursing facility, the NAACP drafted Pearlie's will, taking $125,000 and approximately 150 acres of land, homes, a blacksmith shop, and orchards. And they later sold that property to the state of California and private white owners. Property and land valued at $7 million in today's market. Glad they didn't know he had land in Sacramento and Sparks, Nevada as well. Proceeds from the sale of that property went to the New York chapter of the NAACP, as well as that $125,000. Nothing staying here in California to help Black families, nor any Black family as far as I can ascertain. What the NAACP did do is set up an educational fund for several white children in the community surrounding Coloma. Names attached to children that upon research did not exist. When we call on organizations to assist in this fight, those that will justly push for change, advocate for legislation and political representation to undo the harms wielded upon Black Americans, we cannot have a seat for organizations like the NAACP that have historically underrepresented Black communities.
I'm so sorry to cut you off in the middle of your statement, but feel free to come back tomorrow or submit your comments in writing. Thanks so much for taking your time and showing up today. Okay, next speaker, please speak into the mic.
Yeah, first of all, the name is Vader, not Vapor. And secondly, I'd like to point out, as I always do, the obvious in the room. So if we look at all the camera operators in here, right, all these professional cameras representing these news agencies, how many of them are Black American? How many of them are operated by Black Americans? Exactly, none. So as we see the racism in this room, as we see that this panel is not even going to call out their own member who didn't show up, and we know why he didn't show up, because he didn't want to get shouted down, right? You know what? The governor's failing us. The governor appointed this panel, and his panel is failing us. Cash reparations. Cash. That's a minimum. Okay? And you guys are not even going to speak on that. He's supposed to represent Black Americans. Is he representing Black Americans? He's in Ghana right now when he's supposed to be here. What is that? And then this fake coalition, did he even speak on it? Did he speak on Amos Brown not being here or the fact that he rejected cash payments for Black Americans? See, these people are, you know what? It's just, it's fake up in here. And the governor is responsible for the fakeness. Yeah, I'm calling
Okay,
you an enemy of the people.
next
to your
speaker,
face.
please. Okay, our next group of speakers is numbers 6 through 10. If you have a number 6 through 10, please line up and approach the mic. Okay, next 5 speakers. Come on down. We have Akil McKinney, and I really apologize if I don't pronounce your name correctly. Ms. White, Mr. Williams, and Norma Haywood. Please line up. Okay, good morning. You may begin. Speaking to the mic.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Akil Kashif El, and I'm here to put my statements on the record, just a few of them. If your seal and your flag, if the seal and the flag of your nation is not in this court, the laws and the Constitution, if the seal and the flag of your nation is not in the court, your law and Constitution is not represented. Therefore, you have no protection in that court. If you are in love with slavery and injustice, just ignore that statement. Assembly Bill 3121 is civil rights legislation reimagined as reparations for African Americans. Civil rights legislation like the Anti-Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, or the Civil Rights Acts of 1964, or the Voting Rights Acts of 1965 are all forms of civil rights legislation reimagined as reparations for slavery. Understand that without an organized political body to articulate the free wills of our people, we're rendered defenseless against all political attacks. Banks capitalized the slave trade and the insurance company underwrote it. The viability of obtaining reparations for slavery is adjusted with providing remedy and recourse for sovereign immunity, statute of limitations, causation, and constitutional standing. Legislative reparations are possible. However, reparations for slavery must be pursued through the President of the United States, the judicial branch of the federal government, and the armed forces. In closing, looking to the people for ideas about law will aid us and you in locating remedy and recourse previously overlooked by legal philosophers. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's Terrence McKinney, and I'm going to talk about the reparations. So reparations are overdue for all foundational Black Americans. Foundational Black Americans that were killed for nothing, babies taken away from mothers, fathers killed for protecting their families, and families broken up on purpose for a profit. Medical genocide, unjust laws, and just plain out brutality. Foundational Black Americans have helped every culture to get on their feet. Now it is Foundational Black Americans' turn to do the same for ourselves. Not just for my generation, but also for the elders that took the time and did the research and educated us and taught us our true history. Also, for the future generations to come that will lead us into the future with their heads held up high. I believe that $5 million in reparations is too little for the work that foundational Black Americans have done for this country and as well for other countries. I believe that $7.6 million is a number that can be used very wisely in our foundational Black American communities. 40 acres is also still a good idea, and instead of a mule, we would like a tractor. I also believe that we should know the name of all the companies that participated in the slave trade so we, foundational Black Americans, can start up our own companies. We should also be allowed to have a choice to learn our mother language other than Spanish or French in our educational classes. We have the Tut language that was started right here in America. During slavery, we have Swahili, Yoruba, Igbo, Zulu, and Hausa. Community colleges and universities should not raise their tuition prices for the next future generations of each foundational Black American family, and we should be able to change our names to our motherland names totally for free. All types of real estate should not go up in price, but it is our land that was supposed to be for us, but as we all know, it was never given. Foundational Black Americans know all too well, all white people did not own slaves. We also know that you were not there when this happened, but we know that you are benefiting from those who helped keep slavery alive and active. To try to keep holding foundational Black Americans back for what is due for us is just another form of slavery. It is preposterous and totally absurd. We are tired of it. Like our great ancestor, Dr. Martin Luther King stated, we are coming for our check. But now most of us have direct deposit. So thank you for your time and listening. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right. Bishop Williams. Good morning, Bishop Williams. Let's give you a minute to get to the mic. Can you help him get to the mic? Thank you. Good morning.
Look, I was in the hospital yesterday, but thank God I'm here this morning. I thank God for all of you all. But ma'am, there's something here that has to be said and something has to be done. We speak about a lot of things that's going on, but one of the main things is missing that we don't talk about enough is the money. I heard on TV this morning that there was $80 billion for Black people in the state of California in reparation. $80 billion, okay? So now, I have the proof that Oakland, California is an Egypt. I have all of that proof. I want y'all to listen to me good. I have that proof. And I sent a copy up there to the chair that we asking for 25% of all the Oakland property, Port of Oakland property, because the Port of Oakland was a slave camp, Egypt, okay? All the city of Oakland was Egypt in the 1800s. So my thing is this, and I want to build a Black Wall Street in Oakland, all Black business. Something never happened. Even in the 1800s, when the Blacks cut down over 500 million trees and they built homes all over the Bay Area in 5 different cities. They didn't build nothing for Blacks. Blacks still slept on the ground and in tents and things. You see what I mean? And matter of fact, 1925, Black wouldn't even allowed to go downtown. There were 2,500 white women marched downtown Oakland, 1925, to keep Black from downtown. And a lot of Black was hung, killed, thrown in the bay, and everything during that time. There's a lot going on that y'all don't know about, okay? I'm bringing things to the light, okay? But I'm asking for a total of building this town, building this, what I want to build in Oakland, a Black Wall Street. I'm asking y'all for $51 billion, okay? That cash money that you put up, number one, to
Thank you.
so I can start building the thing that we need in Oakland here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Bishop. It's always so nice to hear from you. Thank you for coming out today. Thank you. Okay, our next, we'll just give Bishop a moment. And next we'll hear from our next speaker, Ms. Haywood. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Norma Haywood. First of all, I want to thank all the speakers except for the Karen. Reason being, well, I drive a tour bus to all these large casinos around here in California from the north to the south. And I get so upset when I hear Indian casinos. We were here before the Indians were. They weren't actually Indians. Columbus was drunk when he came here, thought he was in India. But we were here also getting gold and everything. What I really want to talk about is my father, the Reverend J.T. Haywood, who had the colored and white signs taken down in Blythe. I was born in 49, and my father had those colored and white signs taken down in Blythe right before he crossed into Arizona. He told me about my family, and I don't call them my descendants, my family. I read about my 4th grade grandmother after they were free. She was snatched from her mother's arms, taken into the big house, and she was the house inward. And she talks about how they were free, and as she's walking with her uncles, they're walking by piles of our people that had been slaughtered. She's walking with her uncles. 3 white men approached my 4th grade grandmother and asked them if they wanted to be free. My uncle said yes. And when my great grandmother explained it, they blew their hair off in front of the 6-year-old. In other words, they shot my uncles point blank with a rifle and told her she better dance or they're going to shoot her toes off. So these casinos, which should be ours, you send me a check for every uncle that I lost, for every year my 4th grade grandmother worked in the big house. You send me a check from Cass Creek, River Rock, Graydon, wherever, because they should be ours. And also, it's just so much I want to say, but my 4th grade grandmother, anyone else can read about your family, it's already in the Library of Congress in her own words, So I just want my money for my family. They're not my descendants. They're my family my father told me about in Blythe, California, northeast of Palm Springs. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next 5 speakers, if you have number 11, 12, 13, 14, or 15, please come forward. If you have number 11, 12, 13, 14, or 15 on your card. Let's see. So is number 11 here? Person who has number 11? I can't pronounce the name. And the next, number 12? Please come forward if you have number 12. All right, number 12, please come forward. Good morning, good morning. Please speak into the mic and your time begins.
Task Force, Chair Tiffany, OMB Tiffany, I should say. Real simple, just direct cash payments. With all the charades going on, all the information that's coming out about Wells Fargo, the $50 million, you know, NAACP's in there. And the only thing I say is just, you guys are just the fronts. You guys are just placed in plants. Like you guys don't have no power. I want the ones that's behind the counter, behind the curtains. I want the you-know-who's that's back there. Tell them they owe me and mine. Reparations, repair, and real estate.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. I think Mr. Harrison, number 13. Who has 13? Please come forward. Go ahead, speak into the mic, and your 2 minutes begins. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Theodore Harrison. So I'm a graduate student, PhD student at the University of Oregon. And so my dissertation work has been on reparations, but it's also reflective of my family history. I come from a long line of educators, specifically in Mississippi, where Reverend Brown is from. And the Lady Barbara Chess was legendary, right? In educating former slaves and those emancipated. Ironically, she was forced into retirement because of integration. They did not accept her certificates and training. And that was also a problem with several of my family members. So my comments are kind of tailored specifically towards education and the importance of it in this plan, not to speak of or in place of any of the other proposals before you. But if you look at a lot of the social debate right now, particularly when you look at Florida and their attempts in school, it's to miseducate our children, right? So that we fight this same fight every generation, right? Because we have a miseducated pool of people, right? So I implore the panel, when you're thinking about how to restore and repair, it has to start also with education. If we don't have control of our education, we don't have control of our future. So I think, I don't remember the exact Malcolm X saying, but he said, you're a fool if you let your enemies educate your children, right? That's a standard practice of the United States government. They did it with Native Americans. They did it with any population they got access to. So they said, we'll give you what you want, integration, all that, take that, but we have to educate your children. I beg and implore you not to let that happen with this.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments this morning. Next speaker. Please come forward. Bentley, Glender, Please go ahead. You have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Bentley Callender, and I am an insurance agent here in Sacramento. I'm a non-foundational Black American, and I'm a legal immigrant. I'm here in support of foundational Black Americans. I do agree with Chris that everything that is connected to the agency needs to go to foundational Black Americans, all contracts, straight down the line. As far as the full service agency, I think that there's a piece that's missing, and it is because of hate crimes against all Blacks everywhere. There is no comparison with hate crimes against any other group like there is with Black Americans. And the full service agency needs to have a division where a division of protection to protect the agency and to protect the beneficiaries. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next speaker, Mr. Curry, please come forward. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Charlton Curry. First of all, I want to thank the task force for getting together and listening to solutions. I also agree with what was happening in San Francisco, payment of $5 million for every eligible Black adult, the elimination of personal debt, tax burdens, guaranteed annual incomes of $97,000. We really need free college for our students. My family came from the South because they were running for their lives. They were fearful of being lynched just for voting. My family and other Black Americans fought in every single war this country's had. From the Civil War to the war on the streets, the war on Black people. So when we ask for reparations, it's happened to other countries, like the Marshall Plan, happened to rebuild Europe. Now people go there for vacation. The GI Bill for American soldiers, but you had to be white. You couldn't be Black. No one fought it. The Homestead Act, land was given to white Americans and white Europeans, but you could not be Black. They said, no, you're Black, no. So now we're asking to be pro-Black, and cash payments are necessary. Money talks, and I want money in my own account. I don't need to have to ask someone else for it. We're all adult to do it. We pay taxes. We deserve the money. It's been given to other people. There are even farmers given money not to farm, but they're white. And that's a shame. We need free housing. We need free health care. If you're sick, you can't function with the money. Mental health is fine too, but cash payments are necessary. I also want to personally commend Senator Stephen Bradford. Your name is all over television, but they call it NIL, but they don't mention you as one of the reasons that it happened. So I thank you for that. And I hope that everybody can understand money rules everything. We just gave Zelensky $100 billion. He's not Black. He's not even American. No one complained. We need our money too. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Chair Moore, we have Attorney General Rob Bonta on the line who is going to join us and make a few comments.
Thank you so much. We'll take a pause to acknowledge Attorney General Rob Bonta. I will introduce him first. On April 23rd, 2021, Attorney General Rob Bonta was sworn in as the 34th Attorney General of the state of California, the first person of Filipino descent and the second Asian American to occupy the position. Attorney General Bonta's passion for justice and fairness was instilled in him by his physician and by his parents, who served on the front lines of some of America's most important social justice movements. It's why he decided to become a lawyer, to help right historic wrongs and fight for people who have been harmed. He worked his way through college and graduated with honors from Yale University and attended Yale Law School. Attorney General Bonta has led statewide fights for racial, economic, and environmental justice and worked to further the rights of immigrant families, renters, and working Californians. He previously worked as a deputy city attorney for the city and county of San Francisco, where he represented the city and county and its employees and fought to protect Californians from exploitation and racial profiling. He went on to pursue elected office in Alameda County, first as an Alameda Council member and later as an assembly member representing Oakland, Alameda, and San Leandro. In the state assembly, Attorney General Bonta enacted nation-leading reforms to inject more justice and fairness into government and institutions. As the people's attorney, he seeks accountability from those who abuse their power and harm others as one of the most important functions of the job. He is married to Assemblywoman Mia Bonta, and they are proud parents of 3 children, Reina, Ileana, and Andres, as well as their dog, Legolas. Without further ado, thank you so much for joining us, California Attorney General Rob Bonta.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the very kind introduction. I really appreciate the opportunity to spend time with you all this morning. Good morning to you, and thank you for including me. I do want to say at the outset, my apologies for not being able to be with you in person. While I am on my way to Sacramento because of weather and some unexpected delays, not able to get to you in person this morning, and my apologies again, and look forward to joining you in person at a future meeting. And I wanted to begin by thanking the members of the task force, commending you for your important work. You've been charged with helping California reckon with the original sin of this country, and something that remains a stain on our history. You are wrestling with and grappling with how the horrors of our past created lasting harm felt by Black Americans in the present day and to the present day. And that's no small order. And you've met the moment and you've risen to the occasion. So thank you for the work you've done, the work you're doing, the work you will continue to do. I also want to express my gratitude to California Secretary of State, Dr. Shirley Weber, for her fortitude and her vision in creating this task force. While she was in the assembly, we joined the California State Legislature together, and I was proud to work with her on many issues and on many bills, but on this one, proud to be her co-author, and proud that I've been able to help bring it to reality or bring it to fruition as the California Attorney General. One of my first priorities as Attorney General was to form the Racial Justice Bureau to support this transformational endeavor among with other efforts to create more racial justice throughout our state. And I want to give my sincere thanks to the members of my team who've provided administrative and technical and legal support and assistance to help us get to this important point that we're at now. The Civil Rights Enforcement Section, particularly Senior Assistant Attorney General Michael Newman and his team, thank you. Special Assistant Attorney General Damon Brown, thank you, Damon. The Office of Community Awareness, Response, and Engagement, thank you, Kat and Maheen and your team. The Conference Services team and everyone throughout DOJ who's been involved in making this a success. It takes a team, it takes a partnership, collaboration, working together, coming together, and we've seen that. I want to thank everyone who's been a part of that. Getting the final report over the finish line is only the first step. After that, of course, the real work begins, and DOJ is committed to internalizing and integrating what we've learned into our institution. When you deliver your findings to the legislature on June 30th, you'll be stepping into uncharted waters. Never has any state government in 400 years of American history embarked on such an expansive effort of truth and reconciliation around the institution of slavery and its present day effects. California is leading the nation, a nation that frankly has moved far too slowly. The truth is, from our earliest days, the institution of slavery has been inextricably woven into the establishment, history, and prosperity of this country. Even after its abolition, our government continued to perpetuate, condone, and often profit from practices that brutalized Black Americans and excluded them from meaningful participation in society. Our legacy of slavery and discrimination has resulted in debilitating economic, educational, and health hardships uniquely experienced by Black Americans today. That's why we must ask, How can we work together to form a more perfect union? That's why you're asking, how can we work together to try to remedy this generational harm and trauma? Your recommendations will play a critical role in helping to unearth history, shed light on the inequities of present day, and begin a sorely needed process of healing. This is one of those rare moments we search for our whole lives, a moment where we can truly make a difference. I'm confident the impact of your insights will reverberate across the state, across the country, and across the world. I look forward to your report. Please know, until then and long after, you have a partner in me and the Department of Justice. I'm honored to work with you. I thank you for the work that you're doing. I appreciate all your contributions. Thank you for the opportunity to join you this morning.
Thank you, AG Bonta. All right, now we will resume with in-person comments. Will the next 5 speakers please come forward? Darlene Crumley, Ty Wilson, Gail Wilkerson, Constance French, I may not have pronounced that correctly, and Matthew Morris. So numbers 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Please come forward if you have 16. Ms. Crumley, please go ahead. You have 2 minutes and please speak into the mic.
Yes, good morning. Good morning to Chair Moore and to the entire task force members. I am Darlene Crumley, member of CJEC and Art Bay area. I would like to thank you for holding this in-person meeting. Although it does not affect me, I would ask the next couple of in-persons be on the weekends, Friday and Saturday, so the descendant community can come. I mean, it affects them. Some have to take off for work. So I would really, really like you to consider that again. And also I would like to make sure that when you submit the reparations proposals, that they are specific to the descendant community that has suffered the harms. We do not, and we demand not to have universal or race-based policies going forward. And also, I would like you to fight more of the reparations myths and disinformation, especially what's on the web. And I think that people are getting confused what's happening in San Francisco to this California Reparations Task Force. And I think more information needs to be put out there, that these are really 2 separate issues going on here. And last but not least, I would like to thank you for voting for the California American Freedmen Affairs Agency that will provide services where none is provided and will provide oversight services where they are being provided, retaining the option to provide direct services where necessary. You voted on this on March the 4th of this year, this month, so please hold to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out this morning. Next speaker, please come forward. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity and the work you guys are doing. My name is Ty Wilson. I'm a direct descendant of the Dollarhide lineage that came on one of the very first slave boats. I might not appear it, but I am half Black. And in a lot of this conversation, everything seems to be black or white. And I ask if there's any considerations for people of mixed race. I don't believe in the race suggestions. I do believe in the lineage. But we have a lot of people that are mixed in this country that don't seem to be included in a lot of conversations. To this day, a California state employment application, you have to pick one box. All my life, I've been forced to pick white or black. I've picked black, and it hasn't always benefited me or hasn't been negative to me. But now when I hear this discussion about what's going on with reparations, I haven't heard anybody mention about people that are of mixed race. So I hope you consider that. I'm not the only one out there. And I speak on behalf of, as far as checking a box, it's an other. And the other thing is, will there be an appeals process if you do not make selections the first time around? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out today. All right, our next speaker, good morning.
Hello, my name is Gail Wilkerson. I'd like to address that lady that said she came after and why should she pay into reparation. I came after slavery and I'm still suffering. My father worked at a white funeral home at 14 years old and in Louisiana, Shreveport, Louisiana. And they would attend to the white dead bodies and throw the black ones against the fence, he said. Even after that, he joined the Navy, the military, and we came out. Well, I was born in San Francisco, and my parents were steered down to East Palo Alto. That's where I live now. Alleged former murder capital of the world. This is after Menlo Park took the right side. Palo Alto came around and took the left side and left the blacks to fend for themselves. I ran for a city council last year. My eyes were open. We're being gentrified. I wasn't successful, and really, I wasn't intending to win, but I'm going to win next time, 2024. Because I'm destined. We're being gentrified. They blew up our Black Wall Street, Whiskey Gulch, which was created by Stanford University to keep their students from getting drunk 3 miles away. So now they done blown it up. There's the Four Seasons there that we're not allowed to open up a business there. It's not for the mom and pops. So I'd like for reparations to come in and for that lady who called in and said, this is still going on. We're still feeling the effects of slavery. I went to Menlo Atherton High School. I was the only Black in a lot of my classes. In fact, I had one Black kid that was, he got out because I guess I couldn't talk at that time. But we were going through all of that, and we're entitled to reparation, and we're entitled to money, land, and the financial things that we were forced out of.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay,
Thanks for coming down and coming out today. All right, next speaker. Good morning.
Hi, my name is Tiambe, and I appreciate your work. And I appreciate everybody that's here. And I want to remind us that we have to do this concurrent work. And so one of the things we have to do is unity of purpose. We're not going to get everything, and we don't expect to get everything from politicians anyway, but we have to stay focused. I think we can do it this time. And there's a lot of great ideas. I'm glad to see the men. I hope that you remember that unity of purpose and power is that what we need. Now, as Kim Mims said, please extend the housing harm timeline till current 2023. I want to talk about the most significant harm, and that is they took away who we are. We don't know who we are. Some Negroes, N-I-G-G-A, N-I-G-G-E-R, African-American, Afro-American, all kind of Asian stuff. We don't know who we are. And as a result, we can't get things done. We fighting against money for our own people. What the hey? What is that about? You know, we know politics are not gonna save us, but we have to remind people. So, okay, right. People said before, Native Americans got reparations. Germans got reparation. Jews got reparation. Japanese got reparation. The Marshall Plan, the redistribution of land plan. And no one says anything to a Chinese woman when she says Chinatown or building Chinatown, Afghanistan, Ukrainian, Vietnamese. They fought and they got all kinds of languages on a little part in San Jose. I mean, and then we can't get reparations. We don't even know who we are. Is that it?
Thank you so much. But feel free to
Okay.
come back tomorrow or
Okay,
submit your
thank you.
comments in
Walk
writing.
together, children. Don't
But
you
thank
worry.
you for coming out. Thank you. All right, this should be Mr. Morris. Good morning. Please go ahead.
Good morning. One of the most important questions that may be asked is, what would reparations repair? When you realize that these systems that were infiltrated with hateful agendas, as is explained in this task force's executive summary, you realize that the imagery linked to my people being the pimps, hoes, drug dealers, and prisoners is not our creation and was a fabrication created by ignorance and hatred to address anyone that is and was Black as a whole. These were systems that we were largely excluded from and therefore could not fairly defend ourselves from its implementation, nor could we protect ourselves from the damage caused by its execution. For example, Hollywood, when they choose to create mass racist stereotypes in movies such as the blaxploitation phenomena, perhaps reparations would replace the negative images of being criminals and jigaboos with that of business owners and leaders, such as those of the Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, what is the harm? The harm is clear when at least 90% of the African American population have PTSD symptoms that transfers from family member to neighbor. This PTSD has even affected me personally because for every victim I saw violent crime, I saw myself in the victim. For every news coverage story that covered it, I saw my likeness in the coverage. According to the US Bureau of Prisons, 40% of the prison population is made up of African Americans, yet we only make up 13% of the United States population. This demonstrates a disproportionate number. How can we even begin to address these issues when our voting rights are also at risk to this day all across the country? This shows that voter suppression of the Black community is still a thing alive and well in this country. We saw places like Los Angeles and Oakland riot based on these unequal conditions that threaten our day-to-day. We have proof of the housing programs and banks that were allowed to mistreat us, the Black Panthers that showed us that the laws were not protecting us on equal footing. Most of the stores that operate in our community are not owned and or operated by African Americans. So how can we be a community when these institutions are not run by us?
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming out. I'm so sorry to cut you off. Thanks for that powerful information. Our next speakers are Group 5. I need Raphael Plunkett, Alexander Brannon, Malik, Kamaji Ainsley, and Dr. Reverend Tony Pierce. All right, so please come forward. Raphael Plunkett. Are you Raphael?
Yes, I am. I'm Raphael.
Raphael, I'm sorry, I
No
pronounced your
problem.
name wrong. Go
Good
ahead,
morning.
please. Good morning.
Good morning. It's great to see you again. It's so good to see all of you. I thank you, Task Force, and I thank you, staff, and I thank the audience. I really appreciate being here today. Joe and I are here from Diamond Bar. We're really grateful to be here. First, I want to tell you, I have my family heirloom with me. I have all of your signatures, and I have photos from when you signed the book with me. This is our family heirloom. And I first wanted to thank Assemblymember Joan Sawyer for having this for us in LA. Having this out is so important to the process. I want to thank you for your lineage-based determination. I also thank you for having the hearings on weekends and weekdays. I thank Senator Bradford particularly for SB 490. That's creative. Thank you very much. I hope it's successful. I ask that the other legislators among you, please be creative for us. Move for us in this effort. I ask that you please continue to ensure that all reparations plans are specific to the descendant community. No universal, no race-based plans, as those would not be reparations. Please be confident in your really tremendous efforts here and be aggressive in combating misinformation and disinformation. If we were to share this report, then we wouldn't have to sit through the hurtful comments and these violent calls for people not reading the report and not understanding that California was indeed a slave state. I thank you for your time. Please know that you are respected and supported.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your comments this morning. Our next speaker, please go ahead.
Good morning. My name is, and thank you to the task force. My name is J. Alexander Brandon, and I'm a veteran and an American freeman. I was born and raised in Compton in South Central Los Angeles in the 1970s and 80s. Earlier this month, the task force voted unanimously to establish a Freeman agency to govern distributions of reparations. In addition to cash payments, I believe the agency should also guard against freeman farming for conservatorship. Many of our freedmen people who fell victims to the crack epidemic in the 1980s had good paying jobs and were homeowners. Some are veterans suffering from PTSD from their military service or from the war on drugs, war on Black families, war on Black fathers, and the war on Black home ownership with subprime mortgage and lending. Many make up over that are living in the streets of California, while services and benefits are being given to the illegal immigrants. A lot of our freedmen veterans are receiving veteran benefits in the form of monetary compensation as high as $3,000 a month, along with Social Security. Because of their condition, some are placed on conservatorships and get small stipends of their money and benefits monthly, which means someone else is controlling their money. I believe the Freedmen Agency, once established, should guard against this and make sure mechanisms are in place to deliver housing, provide services, and protections to the undeserved population. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next speaker, please.
My name is Malik. I'm with the Marin City Reparations Coalition. And like everybody else, you know, we all have our stories, but I wanted to take my time to provide a particular invitation and a request to this board to hold some of their future hearings in the smaller outreach communities. There's still a lot of training that needs to be done, and whether the whole board can make it, half of it, a third of it would be fine. And Marin City is a small community about 5 minutes north of San Francisco that sprang up during the war years. And we've lost a lot of ground, but somehow we're still there. It's also the home of Paul and Tanisha Austin. Some of you may have heard of their case that just made national attention. They live about 3 minutes from me. What happened was they put like $500,000 into upgrading their home, only to have it assessed at slightly more than what it was valued at before. It's also the home of, not Marin City, but Marin County, the former home of Governor Gavin Newsom, who graduated from high school and spent a lot of time hanging out there. So if you guys can consider we holding the thing in Marin City, we'd love to have you. It would help us to save our town. It would help to keep this current lawsuit in the national attention, and it would go a long ways in terms of helping us to educate people about this whole reparations movement. And I am in support of this board, maybe not everything it does, but you know how we are along the way. You're gonna hear some yeah, and ooh, we listen to see if there's anything there. If it ain't, keep moving. We don't have time for that. Right. All right.
Thank you. All right, our next, and it appears to be our last, next to last speaker. Ms. Ainsley, please come forward. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning to the board. The name is Kamji Ansley. I stand here as a third generation born Californian. My great grandmother was also born in San Francisco, California. My concerns is about the report. If I was California, I'd be putting my checkbook back in my pocket after reading this report, because I can see in this report what the federal government has done to Black Americans, but I don't see the case made of how California violated First Amendment, Second Amendment, 13th Amendment, 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment rights from the time she scooted in to the nation in 1850 against Black Californians. I need a report that is specific to the atrocities that has happened to Californians from the time of the gold rush and the miners. Those families did not disappear. Those families were robbed. I'm an heir, and I should have the capital in California to have a house that hangs off the coast of Pacifica with bay windows that stretch around 20 feet from left to right, looking and counting the whales and the seagulls, teaching my grandchildren their ABCs as we look at the wildlife. But I have been robbed. I have been robbed of my heirhood. All my money has been robbed, and I need a report from this task force that represents the robberies of the Black Californians from 1850 until present day. We need to talk about the poisoning and the redlining that even my ancestors were ushered into, and the atrocities of that, the cancer rate in those neighborhoods. We need to talk about the conflict of interest. Wells Fargo got all of their money from being a slave capital federalism. So I'm concerned when the NAACP gets $51 million and then one of the chairs from San Francisco NAACP takes direct cash payments off. As an heir, I deserve
Sorry.
direct
Your
cash
time-
payments,
your
no
time is up.
programs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our last two speakers, please come forward. Reverend Tony Pierce and Andrea Jordan, and that will close our in-person speaking comments today. Good morning, Reverend Pierce.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Well, I think you know why I'm here. That's why I'm always coming. Where's the money? Where's the cash? Where's the check? Don't be afraid. Please don't be afraid. $5 million. San Francisco's already made a move. $5 million is nothing. And I'll tell you why. If they spread it over 50 years, that's $100,000 a year, and you're in the top tax bracket, 35% Fed, 16.8 California, you'll be lucky if you end up with $40,000 a year. We need to do this. We need to get the money. Where's the money? Let's get the money now. $223,000 for housing is not enough. We're looking at just the redlining. There's predatory lending. If you're African American, chances are you're paying more on your mortgage for the same amount of money as somebody else. And that's not right. So let's get the money. Where's the money?
Thank you. Thank you so much for your comments. Our last speaker will be Miss Jordan. Please come forward. Good morning.
Hello, I'm Andrea Jordan, and just the idea of us having this format, everyone knows what has happened to us. You can look up under bridges, you can look everywhere in this country and see what happened to us. My great-grandfather was a sharecropper who died, who worked from sunup to sundown and died with nothing, had 17 children, and died with a frown on his face. From everything that was took, the laws that were created, they took his land and created laws to keep it. Everything that has happened to our people has been an atrocity in this country. And it is time. You've paid everyone else, and we've gotten nothing, nothing. The Black man has gotten nothing here. It's time to do the right thing by us. It is absolutely time to do it. We've talked about it. You've studied. So far, the only people that's gotten paid is the study people, the people that's studying it. But what about the people? Power to the people.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That concludes our call-in and in-person comments today. Feel free to come out tomorrow or any of the future meetings of the task force to make comments. And as always, you can submit your written comments to reparationstaskforce@glj.ca.gov. I will now turn the meeting back over to Chair Moore. Thank you again for coming out.
Thank you again, Ms. Martin Walton. Thank you, members of the public, and thank you, Attorney General Bonta, for welcoming remarks as well. The next item on the agenda is item number 4, action item approval of March 3rd and 4th, 2023 meeting minutes. Task force members, we've had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes from the last hearing. Are there any questions, comments? If none, we can entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented. A motion to approve the minutes as presented. Is there a second? It's been properly moved by Member Tamaki and properly seconded by Member Montgomery Stepp that the task force approve the March 3rd and 4th, 2023 meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion on the matter? Hearing no discussion, I'll turn to Parliamentarian Johnson for a roll call vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will begin to call the roll, calling each of your names, and I will start with Chair Moore.
Aye.
Chair Moore votes aye. Member Bradford? Member Bradford votes aye. Member Grills? Aye. Member Grills votes aye. Member Holder? Aye. Member Holder votes aye. Member Jones Sawyer? Aye. Member Jones Sawyer votes aye. Member Lewis? Aye. Member Lewis votes aye. Member Montgomery Steppe? Aye. Member Montgomery Steppe votes aye. Member Tamaki?
Aye.
Member Tamaki votes aye. Madam Chair, there are 8 members present and voting. There were 8 ayes and 0 nays and 0 abstentions.
Thank you. There are 8 ayes, 0 nays, and 0 abstentions, and thus the ayes have it and the motion carries. The meeting minutes from March 3rd and 4th are accepted as presented. The next item on the agenda is agenda item number 5, discussion and potential action, task force approval of draft report, Part 7, report on Racial Justice Act implementation and related recommendations, presented by members Tamaki and Holder.
So thank you, Chair Moore. We're at basically the last stage of the presentation of the survey report. And so what we have not presented to the task force and to the public are the recommendations, which are, of course, the most important thing. There is no need, I think, for any particular action item in connection with this. So this is more or less a report out. And the principal part of it is what the recommendations would be in the final report. Just to refresh everybody's recollection, we began this endeavor actually in December of 2021. That's when the advisory committee was constituted to look into how the task force might use its ability to compel responses from government or private agencies. The problem, however, is the short life of the task force, which, as everybody knows, is going to end as of July 1, 2023. And we're searching basically for how to use this and not be in a situation where the people we're trying to seek the information from simply runs out the clock until we expire and we're no longer around to continue to push this. Many of the issues, if you were to put in litigation, would take more than 2 years. And some of the information we talked about getting would have been subject to objections and motions in the court process to compel, basically a lawsuit to get the information to enforce it. So maybe out of a half a dozen possible areas that we looked at, we thought the enforcement of the Racial Justice Act would be the most amenable to getting useful information within the allotted time frame of our existence without getting mired in litigation that would extend beyond the life of the task force and which would cause our process to be useless. So between December 21 and February 2022, we looked into areas of housing, employment, insurance, companies that benefited off enslavement, et cetera. And we thought the one issue that would be most amenable and most need of information was the Racial Justice Act. And as summarized in prior reports, the problem is obvious in terms of mass incarceration, and that is bias seeping into every stage of the prosecutorial system, from arrest to charging to diversion to sentencing and so on. And the Racial Justice Act provides remedies to prove that, for example, Black people are being sentenced more harshly or being charged more severely and more often than other races. But that all requires data. So we undertook the first step to, after determining this, through March through April of 2022, to draft, revise, edit, and format the survey questions to all district attorney offices in California and all of the courts. And through May through June 2022 to finalize and send out those surveys, in September to October 2022 to actually get those responses and to follow up with straggler counties that did not respond. So by September of 2022, we're looking at first drafts of the analysis of the data we were receiving, and November 22 to March of 2023. So we're now in current time. The Research Center of the Department of Justice did a lot of work to distill what is being collected. And this, as far as I know, was the first attempt to collect data on a statewide basis. And without that data, the Racial Justice Act and the rights provided to defendants is pretty empty. So that basically is the framing of it. I think before we move into recommendations, I think we see this as a necessary and good first step, and that the recommendations to the legislature then go to furthering that effort. So maybe I'll turn it over to Lisa, Member Holder, to continue.
Thank you, Member Tamaki. I'll start off with a personal anecdote. I've been a lawyer for 20 years, a little over 20 years now. It's hard to believe. And I started out my legal career as a public defender in Los Angeles at the Los Angeles Alternate Public Defender's Office. And I remember, 20 some odd years ago, going into the holding tanks, which is where public defenders would have to go to talk to their clients before we went into court and presented to the judge. And at that time in LA, the holding tanks were separated by race. And there was a holding tank for white people, a holding tank for Latinos, Asians, and a holding tank for Black people. Though typically the white holding tank would have one person in there, one lone individual in a large holding tank. The Latino holding tank would maybe have 15, 20 individuals in the same size holding tank. The Asian holding tank would have maybe 3 or 4 people, same size holding tank. And the African American, the Black holding tank would sometimes have over 100 people in the same size holding tank. And every time I had to go in those holding tanks to talk to my clients, to try and get their story before I went to talk to the judge or the prosecutor about the arraignment, I would come out shaking because the experience was like being transported back to 1619, when I would look around at each holding tank and see this holding tank full to brimming over, people packed in like sardines. Similar to the images that we've seen of what it looked like in a slave ship, in the bottom of a slave ship. And it was really like being transported hundreds to centuries ago, the feeling that I would come out with, as if we were still enslaved. Now, I tell that story because, California has been starting to do a better job at being a little bit more of a watchdog around policing and looking at tracking who is being surveilled by the police, who's being stopped, who's being arrested. But we really have not been looking at, or shining a spotlight on what's going on with prosecutors. Prosecutors have a lot of power in the criminal justice system, in a criminal injustice system. And, they have complete discretion over charging. So they get to decide whether to charge someone who's been arrested. They get to decide whether, or they get to make decisions about bail. They get to make decisions about who gets a plea and who doesn't get a plea. They make decisions about who's going to get a parole violation, who's going to get a probation violation. And they make decisions about who's going to get diversion, right? And that's a process where instead of actually getting charged or sentenced, you get diverted. And so you get to do some community service, and then you never, if you complete it, you never get anything on your record, right? And so prosecutors have a tremendous amount of power, and there's also a tremendous amount of bias with prosecutors. And that's, you know, one of the reasons why you had so many Black folks being charged in those holding tanks 100 to 1. Those are the disparities that I was seeing day to day. You know, there's studies that show that, for instance, prosecutors in Los Angeles County, researchers found that prosecutors are more likely to press charges against Black people than white defendants, and determined that these charging disparities could not be accounted for by race-neutral factors, such as prior record, seriousness of the charge, or use of weapon. So these are not race-neutral decisions all the time. A lot of time, race is the deciding factor about whether you're going to charge a gang enhancement that gives someone an extra 10 years, or a weapons enhancement where someone's going to be looking at an extra 10 to 15 years. Race is often the deciding factor. We didn't make it that way. That's how it was given to us. And, you know, one of the things that you have to really be paying attention to is implicit bias among prosecutors and in the prosecution process. You know, a lot of people will be like, oh, I'm liberal, I'm not racist, but they see a defendant that looks a certain way and they ascribe and assign certain characteristics to that person as being more dangerous, more threatening. It's more important to lock that person away. And that has everything to do with race, those decisions. You know, a UCLA study by researchers who have been studying implicit bias in prosecutions, they determined that the conditions under which implicit biases translate most readily into discriminatory behavior are when people have wide discretion in making quick decisions with little accountability. Prosecutors function in just such environments. They exercise tremendous discretion to decide whether, against whom, and at what level of severity to charge a particular crime. They also influence the terms and likelihood of a plea bargain and the length of the prison sentence, all with little judicial oversight. So what's missing from the process? We have this situation of bias. We have this situation of disproportionality. What is missing is data and uniform tracking of data, uniformity that limits discretion, that limits prosecutorial discretion. What's also missing is transparency, right? If prosecutors have to be more transparent about their charging decisions and other decisions, that they're going to be a little bit more careful about whether they're letting their biases infect the process. The other thing that's missing is accountability, right? And so we have to now infuse this prosecutorial system with uniformity, transparency, and accountability. And the Racial Justice Act is an excellent vehicle, because it's pre-existing. It's an excellent vehicle to now infuse the criminal legal system with accountability, transparency, and uniformity in terms of collecting and tracking data. So that's what we are attempting to do with these recommendations. I wanted to give you that background so you understand why we are recommending the things that we are recommending. If we could go to the slide, let's go to number 6. And so what we are doing, what we are recommending is to ensure that the Racial Justice Act claims can be raised, right? We want to make sure that defendants, especially Black defendants who are being disproportionately charged with based on biased charges and biased decision-making, we want to make sure that every person who is under state supervision, whether you're on parole, whether you're a defendant who's defending against criminal charges, we want to make sure that these folks can access the Racial Justice Act. So an enhanced right to discovery in criminal cases where defendants raise Racial Justice Act claims and or defenses with a low threshold for asserting these claims in the context of criminal litigation. We don't want people to have to jump through 50 hoops to be able to say that I think that this is a biased prosecution. I think that it's a racially motivated and anti-Black prosecution. I think I'm being prosecuted and persecuted because I'm Black. We don't want people to have to jump through a million hoops to be able to say that and to be able to get the discovery they need to prove that. So we want the Racial Justice Act to be enhanced so that there's not a lot of hoops that people have to jump through. Now, what's also very important, as I said, is accountability. So a lot of the measures that we're asking for are shining a spotlight on what prosecutors are doing, holding them accountable, holding their feet to the fire. And one way to hold people accountable is to penalize them if they violate the Racial Justice Act. So if prosecutors are violating the Racial Justice Act, we want them to be penalized as a deterrent so that it stops. So individual prosecutors who thwart the Racial Justice Act, data transparency requirements, and engage in discovery violations should be subject to penalties in the form of adverse rulings, jury instructions, and case dismissals. So if you're going to prosecute someone because they're Black and we are able to discover that using the Racial Justice Act, case dismissed. We can go to the next slide. We are proposing that the legislature enact a Racial Justice Act Commission, similar to what we are seeing on the policing side, where we have a Racial Identity Profiling Act, and we have a commission and a task force that is a steward of that process. We want that on the prosecution side as well, right? So create a commission similar to the RIPA board, Racial Identity Profiling Act board, to track, audit, monitor, and analyze data generated by the Racial Justice Act process. This commission could be styled as an arm of the Freedmen's Agency. We would establish key performance indicators and other quality control measures to ensure that prosecutors, and other officers of the court, including judges, are complying with the Racial Justice Act and ensuring that people aren't being prosecuted because they're Black, or people aren't being violated for parole violations or probation violations because they're Black. We want this commission to be able to publish annual reports similar to the publications that the RIPA board does, right, on prosecutorial bias for public consumption. So all of California can see when there are violations of the Racial Justice Act, when there's a lack of uniformity, when discretion is being misplaced and abused. We want those reports, we want that data to be able to publish so that all of California can see and hold these prosecutors' offices accountable. We also want to establish a federal nexus which ensures that California's data on prosecutorial bias and criminal legal racial profiling is uploaded and synced to national racial profiling databases. And that's really important that we have this federal nexus, because we always want to have a landscape view of what's happening all over the country in terms of biases against Black people, right? Because that's going to help us to get reparations at the federal level, quite frankly. So when California is tracking this information about biases to Black defendants and people on parole, et cetera, it all should be uploaded into a federal database so the federal government knows where the biases are in California and as a landscape of what's happening all over the country. Let's move to the next slide. I think it's 8. Okay. And then, as I said, so much of this is about increasing accountability and holding prosecutors' feet to the fire to ensure that they are using their due diligence in a way that is fair and even and appropriate and not based on anti-Black animus, which has been the case previously. So we want to make sure that, that watchdog groups and institutions like public defenders' offices, et cetera, who have the ability to hold prosecutors accountable are given the resources, given the technical advice and the technical assistance that they are going to need to serve as watchdog groups to make sure that prosecutors aren't coming into court giving diversion to the person in the white tank, and then when 5 or 6 people in the black tank did exactly the same thing, they're suddenly not getting diversion. Right? We want there to be a process for oversight, technical assistance to the offices and to the institutions that are working closely with prosecutors and can watch them, quite frankly, and make sure that they're not applying these systems unfairly.
What about the oversight be enough?
Let's allow members Tamaki and Holder to finish their presentation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, and there's, I'm just giving you the highlights. We have a very expansive list of recommendations to make sure that there's more accountability, uniformity, and transparency. A couple of highlights that we didn't put into the slides are we want to assure that these systems, these tracking systems that we are now instituting within the prosecutor's office are also being linked to what's happening in terms of bias in policing. We want to be able to see the cascading bias that starts from the minute a person is stopped because of their race, and usually ends with a person getting a much longer sentence because of their race. And so when we create a tracking system for the prosecutor's office, we want to make sure that it's linked to the tracking system that has been created by RIPA and other policies to the police stations and to the police precincts. So we have a full landscape, a panorama of how racism is infecting the system and affecting Black folks. We also want to make sure, currently the RJA does not allow folks on parole to use that process, but there is a lot of bias in terms of people getting parole violations and getting thrown back into prison based on a so-called parole violation that might have everything to do with the fact that they're Black. And so we want to make sure that the RJA process is available to people on parole, not just defendants or people defending against their case. And one of the other important highlights is that we want to make sure that prosecutors now have an affirmative obligation to turn over any evidence of racial profiling at any stage of the process. And that's really important because right now, defendants have to dig for that information. The prosecutors don't have to. If the prosecutor knows that there was bias at some point, like there was a racist police officer or there was a racist prosecutor on the case, they don't have to turn that over. They don't have an affirmative obligation to turn that over. Right. We want to infuse in this process an affirmative obligation. So defendants And parolees don't always have to go digging for this information, which is sometimes so difficult to find. And so with that affirmative obligation, the minute you go into an arraignment, you know, to plead guilty, for instance, the prosecutor will have to turn over any evidence they have of bias or racism in the system. So those are just some of the highlights for the recommendations that we've put forth. Happy to entertain questions or turn it back over to Don to finalize.
I don't have anything to add.
That's great. Thank you so much. Let's That's an excellent presentation. Any questions or comments from the task force members about what's been presented? Oh, sorry. Member Jones, so you're recognized.
And I definitely want to thank the work that Member Holder and Tamaki have done. I don't think people really realize how important it is that we have this discussion about racial bias in the criminal justice system. It was so bad and so prevalent that we overfilled the prisons to where a court order had to be issued to reduce the number of people in prison. The fact that we were overrepresented in the CDCR, in the prison system, in itself is criminal. And even now, I did a bill, AB 2799, Artistic Expression Act, which protects rap artists, that when they do the artistic expression of doing a rap album, that would be used in criminal cases against them, even though it had nothing to do with the actual crime. And it's going on right now as we speak, that DAs are using their artistic rap lyrics for those purposes. And now in California, because of my bill, it can't be used that way anymore. In Florida, and I say rap because they use it predominantly against African-American males. They did not go against Johnny Cash when he talked about, or Elvis Presley, or any of those. And so we need to be ever vigilant that in the criminal justice system, even now, there's a lot of discussion about opioids and fentanyl. And we're having discussions about what should we do? Should we have enhanced penalties? Should we go back to that day, not so long ago, when we were scared to death of the crack cocaine epidemic, and we started to do this war on drugs, what ended up to be a war on African Americans, which separated families, men from their families, which broke up communities. And we really need to look at public health alternatives and not just public safety alternatives. Because when we go to public safety alternatives, as you heard here, DAs and law enforcement have a tendency to go after us. Justice should be justice, not just us. And what happens is it becomes real easy for law enforcement and the criminal justice system to go against or come after just us. And so I've made it a point as chair of public safety for the state of California to look at all of this, everything, and try to come up with alternative ways so that we can help our communities, all communities, no matter what color, so that we ultimately, and I'll give the example, if we're talking about drug abuse, let's get to the health causes of it. Let's stop it. Let's not move it down the road. We may not no longer worry about crack cocaine, but now we're worried about fentanyl and opiates. Well, quite frankly, I don't know any Black pharmaceutical companies that's spreading opioids all over the place. And I don't know of anyone south of the border that look like us that are doing it. But I guarantee you, if we don't do this right, they will again fill the prisons with people that look like a lot of people that look like us in this room and outside this room. So it's extremely important that we get it right. Extremely important. And what you just heard about the Racial Justice Act, what you just heard about how we can make sure that we don't have a reoccurrence what had happened during the crack cocaine time, is what our esteemed colleagues are talking about, making sure that the criminal justice system doesn't turn on us. And so I commend them for bringing that forward. I really do like some of the ideas that you brought forward, and maybe some bills I could think of that I could possibly do in the future. So I want to thank you for the work that you're doing.
Member Grove, you're recognized.
Thank you, members Tamaki and Holder. This was an excellent presentation. And I just want to say that what you are identifying, particularly in the holding cells, aligns with what I see when I go in and do inspections of the county jails and the lockups at the county courts. I wanted to know if it's not explicitly stated, if there could be an explicit uplifting of the application of the Racial Justice Act to the county jails. We are seeing an incredible level of discrimination and disparity there, including retaliation against Black folks who, by the deputies and the jail staff, limited access to education-based incarceration, limited access to trustee positions where you can get time off for working while you're incarcerated, inadequate responses to grievances made by Black folks who are incarcerated, higher rates of placement into high observation housing, which means you're in the most restricted areas possible in the jail, and also placement in isolation, and then higher rates of death while in custody if you're African American. And we have data that we've been compiling for the last few years, but it's been a losing battle with the Sheriff's Department in LA County to try to get these things addressed.
I would just say, I think that's a really excellent suggestion. And Dr. Tiffany Chance and Dr. Randy Chance and Dr. Tiffany Jantz has been terrific in helping us craft the recommendations and also analyzing the data that we did collect, but none of it has to do with in-custody treatment, which is what you're saying, that even in custody, there's a disparateness in the way that and race plays a part. And so what we'll do is Member Holder and I will work with the Department of Justice Research Center to see what we can do in that connection, see if it can make its way into the final report in some, fashion.
Member Bradford, you're recognized.
Thank you. And I too want to echo my appreciation for the report. As the former chair of the Senate Public Safety, many of the issues that you mentioned are still prevalent today, and it requires additional legislation, as Assemblyman Holden, as Reggie Jones Sawyer stated, because the practices are still going on today. Just yesterday in public safety, I introduced a piece of legislation that deals with pretextual stops. The number of African Americans and Latinos who are stopped simply because, a headlight's not working, and we know how that has exacerbated to the harm and injury and even the death of individuals such as Philando Castillo and, Sandra Bland and, on and on and on, Dante Wright. So it's needed, and I'm glad you referenced RIPA, because that was the report that we used to formulate the legislation and justify it. So really appreciate that. And you also mentioned, as a former defense attorney, having evidence provided. Many times law enforcement and the prosecutors withhold evidence. That's why also yesterday we introduced SB 441 that requires within 3 days that of trial that you disclose that evidence that led to that arrest, led to that charge, led to that possible conviction. So you can adequately represent these individuals, because many times law enforcement and the prosecuting attorneys hold that back. So this is still critically important, and it's still being, happening today. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Senator Bradford. Any other comments or questions? Member Montgomery Step, you're recognized.
Thank you so much. I'm going to add my appreciation to members Holder and Tamaki for this report and all that went into it. Just an additional angle as we talk about the disparity that exists in our criminal legal system. As we're embarking on an era where folks are considering the care court and the conservatorship for people who are experiencing homelessness over a long period of time, my concern has always been that African Americans will get the brunt of whatever that system brings us. And so how that, it kind of holistically fits into our health, our conversation with regard to mental health, but it could be, and I don't know how the system is fully set up yet, but it could also have a way through the criminal legal system. I know in San Diego, our city attorney has a separate program, but it's there. She also has the power to prosecute, right? So I'm just thinking, I want that to be just a part of this conversation as we think about all of the different systems that negatively impact African American people. I am concerned about that one as well. I understand why it's in conversations, but I'm very, very concerned about it. Thank you.
Yeah, and just in response to that, that's one of the reasons why when I think about this, I'm not just thinking about folks who are in the jail, defendants, awaiting trial, but I'm also just thinking about everyone who's under state supervision, right? State law enforcement supervision. And so, thinking very expansively and holistically about things like conservatorships and how the biases are going to ensure, again, that it's an outcome that negatively and adversely impacts Black people more than anybody else if you get put into a conservatorship. And being able to have some kind of pathway to defend against that, that decision, if there is bias in that decision-making process. So I think raising conservatorships is really, really important. And, all of the systems that, when we're thinking about, state supervision of individuals and the biases that go into that decision-making. Yeah.
If there are any other questions, or any potential action? Okay, any last thoughts from members? Sorry, Attorney Newman, you recognize.
Thank you. Yes, we do need action on everything we're going to be talking about today. We've agendized to talk about each of the different components of the report. And the way forward is to vote to accept the recommendations as presented. And so in this case, it would be accepting the recommendations as presented in Chapter 31, and then the recommendations in chapters 18 through 30, which are grounded on the data in Chapter 31. We will also talk about those at a later time, but the idea is, as we progress through the contents of the report, would be to accept the recommendations as presented, subject to the discussion that's had here, and we're taking notes about issues relating to the jail, and Member Montgomery Step, your comments as well. So we'll augment those. And then you'll have through April 10th to get us edits on the drafts that you have. April 10th is going to be probably a drop dead for us to then make edits, amend the final report, and then publish it in advance of the next meeting, at which time you will vote to adopt the report as final. So that's sort of the tick-tock of moving forward from here. So for today, for every single item that we're talking about with regard to the report, we do need a motion to adopt accept the recommendations as presented. And then that will sort of put to bed that component of the report.
Sorry, Chair Moore. My understanding was at the end of the day or whenever it's on the agenda, there would be one motion omnibus that basically would wrap everything, but you're asking us to do a chapter by chapter sort of motion.
We can do it that way also. So the alternative would be the end of the whole thing, we do it. But again, we'll need to make sure that that definitely happens. And maybe we can break it up so we're very clear. At the end of today, we have today's stuff, and at the end of tomorrow, we have tomorrow's stuff. That can still be done. I think going item by item, we'll clarify each of the components. But if you'd rather do it at the end and say, when we approve the formatting, for example, there's a couple of changes in formatting, we can just have that vote be basically to adopt all the recommendations as made, subject to all of the discussion throughout the 2 days. We can hold the votes and just do one vote at the end, if that's the preference. It's fine either way.
Subject to the chair's comments, I think that would be easier just to do one vote as opposed to a separate vote for every chapter, but defer that to.
I think we should go item by item, just so there's no confusion.
All right. Well, in that case,
disagrees with or wants out or wants revisited, doing one motion at the
I see.
end leaves the DOJ to have to sort of suss out the various conversations. So our parliamentarian here makes her recommendation.
thank you. In that case, may I make a motion? All right. So I move that the recommendations of the subpoena survey advisory committee be adopted and be included in the final report.
It's been properly moved by Member Tamaki and properly seconded by Senator Bradford that the task force approve the recommendations from the subpoena advisory committee and that the recommendations are included in the final report as presented. Is there any discussion on the matter? I had a quick question. Did you all collaborate with the RIPA board? And is the Racial Justice Act under their purview as well? I was just curious, a technical question.
I don't know if you all is referring to DOJ or to the advisory committee. So the RIPA board is another board that is a client of the Civil Rights Enforcement section. And so we, are very well aware of the activities that are going on. Aisha also works on that board. So we're aware of what they're doing. The Racial Justice Act and the RIPA Act don't necessarily integrally overlap with each other. This is a completely different set of data. And so the recommendation that has been crafted on the advice of the advisory committee for this particular component would be a new set of data collection that wouldn't necessarily be implemented now, depending on how the implementation occurs with regard to differentiation of individual data. There could be sort of a reverse impact on how the RIPA data might be amended. But no, there's not a direct overlap or correlation.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the matter? Hearing none, I'll turn to Parliamentarian Johnson for a roll call vote.
Thank you. I will begin the vote with Madam Chair.
Aye.
Madam Chair votes aye. Member Bradford? Aye. Member Bradford votes aye. Member Grills? Aye. Member Grills votes aye. Member Holder? Aye. Member Holder votes aye. Member Jones Sawyer? Aye. Member Jones Sawyer votes aye. Member Lewis? Aye. Member Lewis votes aye. Member Montgomery Steppe? Aye. Member Montgomery Steppe votes aye. And Member Tamaki?
Aye.
Member Tamaki votes aye. Madam Chair, there were 8 members present and voting. There were 8 ayes and 0 nays, and there were no abstentions.
Thank you, Parliamentarian Johnson. There are 8 ayes, 0 nays, and 0 abstentions, and thus the ayes have it, and the motion carries. The next item on the agenda is lunch, which will last from 12:30 to 1:45. It's 12:17, so we'll be breaking early for lunch. Thank you all, and please be back at 1:45.
The way it currently stands, forced labor, slavery takes precedence over rehabilitation and public safety.
Oh, by the way, while the Biden administration gives reparations to everyone but free people, look at the billions he has run over to Ukraine.
We don't have black grocery stores because if you think about it now, just to get in that supply chain, it's almost unheard of.
They don't want the truth to get out. Okay? I don't want to know what my family did or what all these people did and all this stuff like that. Okay? You read that 500-page report.
There's this thing called white superiority and black inferiority. That mindset allows all of the behaviors that we've seen across generations, allows for the construction of these policies and practices and systems and structures that continue to oppress us. This is not a handout. This is a debt that is owed.
You know, Allensworth was like the internet of his time in 1904, 1905.
The total black population in California is about 2.6 million, and then of that, the descendants compose about 2.2 million of that. So California, with a multi-billion-dollar surplus, can absolutely afford to satisfy the international terms for reparations, beginning with compensation.
Any financial obstacle that exists that impedes the success of increasing financial prosperity needs to be dealt with and eliminated.
No matter where we've been, no matter what part of this fight we've been in, we've been harmed, and we've had harm done to us specifically.
When I got to Los Angeles, this was some of the worst segregation I'd ever seen. And remember, I'm telling you, I'm from Mississippi.
Because as you can see, I'm giving you broken history right now, you know? But I had to give it to you guys today. I said, no, I got to show them this because it's so precious and nobody really knows about it.
Black people don't have that kind of luxury. Our historically black communities have been redistricted multiple times.
Now listen, if you can't handle the TR roof, don't tune in.